Okay. All right. Apologize for the delay, guys. We're just trying to get some audio visual stuff figured out. So anyway, thank you for joining us. Good evening. All right, we are going live now. We are ready to go. So I'm going to convene this public hearing of the Litchfield Elementary School District Governing Board. Today is Tuesday, July 7th. First, we are going to start on our agenda with Wendy Qualls in the School Finance Fundamentals presentation.
Thank you, President Clymer. Stevie, if you'll please put up our first presentation. So this evening, we are going to start with just some basic information about school finance. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the key concepts in Arizona school finance, how budget limits are determined, how tax rates are set, and how our district spent our maintenance and operation budget in previous years. Next slide, please. Back one, please, Stevie. So school districts maintain their accounts in funds, similar to a bank account. A fund would track all the revenue and expenditures related to a specific project or activity. And our district has over 50 of these funds. The largest fund we have is our maintenance and operation budget. That's where our daily salaries, benefits, services, and supplies are recorded. Our capital fund, or otherwise known as DAA, we purchase permanent things like new buildings, furniture, equipment, technology, textbooks, library books, and related instructional aids for our teachers to use in the classroom. Next slide, please. So how are our budget limits determined? It's based on a formula in Arizona Revised Statute, and the items that we enter into those formulas are the number of students in classrooms and the number of miles that students are transported. Next slide, please. So once that information is entered into the formulas, we end up with our equalization spending limits. We first look at how much property tax will the assessed value in our boundaries generate, and we subtract that from our spending limit. And the remainder of that money comes from the state in equalization. Next slide, please. So once we know how much of our budget is going to come from state equalization, we add our maintenance and operation budget, our district additional assistance, our capital funds, our debt service, and our adjacent waste budgets all together. We subtract out what the state is going to contribute towards those budgets, and then we divide the remaining amount by our assessed value in our district. And that then equals our tax rate. Next slide, please. So the assessed value has increased over the last few years since we do continue to add new housing and also industries within our boundaries. So for next year, our assessed value is over $1 billion. Next slide, please. So when we look at our enrollment versus our tax rate, the top line with the circles is our enrollment over the years since 2013, all the way up to the projected amount for the 2021 school year. The tax rate is the lower line, and you can see how that fluctuated throughout the years. The largest increase was in 18-19, and that's when we first implemented the increase for the override from a 10% override to a 15%. Also in that year, we had a bond sale of $14,760,000. So that did increase the funding that was needed through our taxes. Next slide, please. So 2018-2019 is the most recent fiscal year we have where our books have been closed. And in that year, the maintenance and operation, the capital, debt service, and adjacent ways, the funding for that, 65% came from the state and 35% from local contributions. Next slide, please. When we look at the expenditures in our maintenance and operation fund, again, that is our largest fund and it's where our daily expenses are paid from. 72.2% were for items in the classroom, instructional support for the teachers, and then also support for our students. Central services, which includes the superintendent's office, the business office, and also technology, was 5.1%. Our utilities were 4.3%. School offices were 4.8%. And then the other of 13.6% is for transportation, maintenance, and other items. Do we have any questions on that information? Okay.
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you, Wendy, very much. Does anyone else have any questions on that presentation?
It's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, you've done a really good job boiling down, which is what is probably the most complicated funding formula I've ever seen. So thank you for doing that. It's nice to try and go over it, every year to make sure that we truly understand how this jigsaw puzzle is put together. So thank you very much. We'll move on to item 1C, which is the 2021 Truth in Taxation. Wendy will also lead us through that.
Proposed budget.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. My agenda has it opposite. So expenditure budget 2021.
Okay, truth and taxation is fine. We can go to that one first.
Okay,
Sorry.
sure. No worries. All right, so we will go with the Truth in Taxation next presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So one of the requirements is a truth in taxation notice to the public if we intend to increase our taxes for our primary rate. So next slide, please, Stevie. So adjacent ways is a fund that the district can levy a tax for fire lanes, fire lines, on-site utilities, driveways, and our perimeter fencing. So when we look forward into next year and the year after, we're planning to construct a new White Tanks Learning Center. And so we'll need some funds to build a new road, bring in some utilities, make sure we have the right fire lanes, fire lines. And so what we'd like to do is levy a tax for this next school year to pay for that. So a total of $626,106. Next slide, please. Back in 2017 was the last year that we levied this tax. And we have a remaining balance in this fund of $26,106. So we subtract that from the budget amount we need. And so we would need to levy $600,000. And that's the same amount that we levied back in 2017. Next slide, please. So the estimated tax on a $100,000 home will be $6. If we would vote to not do this increase, there would be no tax increase. And the prior year was 0 because we didn't levy this tax. So the overall increase is $6 on a $100,000 home. Okay. Any questions on that?
No questions. I just want to reiterate what you said just so that I understand. The last time that we did this was in 2017.
Yes.
And then when was it before that? Do you remember?
We probably levied it at least the 2 years before that because we were building up funds to build Verado Heritage and Boleyn.
Okay.
So it was 600,000 each year.
Each year. Okay. But we haven't done it since 2017.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you, Wendy. Now we are going to move on to the expenditure budget fiscal year 2021.
Right. So we'll give Stevie just a minute to pull up that presentation for us. Okay, so tonight we're looking at our 2021 proposed budget. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, our maintenance and operation fund is our largest fund. And the components that go into the state's formula is our average daily membership. So at this point, I'm estimating our average daily membership to be 10,622. The state then adds weights to students. So there's a group A weight, which is to help with the economy of scale. So a school district with less than 600 students would receive a heavier weight than a district with 600 or more students. The group B weights are additional funding for K-3 programs, also for our English language learners and our special ed students. So the state recognizes it costs more to educate those groups of students, and so they add an additional weight, and that's called our B weight. The base support level for this year, again, this is approved at the state level, is $4,359.55. The other component to this formula is our daily route miles. And normally the route miles are based on the previous year mileage for the 100th day or the average daily route miles. But with COVID and the closure of schools, one of the exceptions they made was that we could go back to the 2019 year and use those miles as our mileage so that our transportation funding would not be reduced. Next slide. So once that information is put into the formula, our revenue control limit is $65 million. We add in our maintenance and operations override, the 15%. That amount is actually based on prior year enrollment, not current year. So that's one of the little tweaks in the M&O formula, is this is based on prior year average daily membership. I estimate a budget carry forward of $5.6 million. We'll be transferring $140,000 into our energy and water fund. That's for a lease payment on our energy management systems. And then also transferring $50,000 to capital for K-3 to be used specifically for our K-3 program. So our general budget limit will be just over $80,500,000.
Wendy, before you go on, just because you just said it, I don't want to forget my question. If you don't mind, I'll ask. You commented that our bus miles and our transportation funding will come from last year's miles because of potentially the disruption this year. What about the disruption from the previous year? It's actually it's fiscal year 2019, not school year 1920.
Correct.
Okay.
So fiscal year 19 was our full year, and then
Okay.
the 20 fiscal year would have been the year that we were closed.
Okay, so, right. Okay, got it. Just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So our revenue sources for maintenance and operations, 64% will be coming from the state and 36% from local. Next slide, please. When we look at how that's going to break down, 61 million will be regular education. About 14.5 million will be special education. Transportation is just over 4 million. And then specifically for our K-3 reading program, just over $600,000. So that gets us to that total budget amount we had on the previous slide of just over $80.5 million. Next slide, please. So the maintenance and operation fund does pay our daily costs. So salaries and benefits make up 85.4% of the budget. That's a very large percentage of that budget. 6.9 is professional services. So that could be contracted teachers, contracted speech therapists, tuition out services. Utilities are just around 4%. Supplies at 2.6. Our property casualty insurance is 0.9% of our funds, and then other is 0.2. And the other would be things like memberships, dues, fees, things like that. Next slide, please. So after the year is over, the Auditor General does their classroom dollar report or the classroom spending report. So I like to look before we start the year to see where I think we're going to end or where close we'll be. So the percentage of the budget for maintenance operation that will be spent in the classroom is 60.3%. And when you look at the bigger picture and you look at not only the classroom, but also the cost of student services like nursing, OT, PT, and then also our teacher training, will be about 73.2% for those areas. Next slide, please. Our unrestricted capital outlay, or our DAA fund, It's also a state formula. It's based on prior year ADM and $450.76 per student. So this is different than maintenance and operations, our large budget, which was based on current year ADM. Capital is based on prior year ADM. Next slide, please. So based on the formula, we'd have just under 5 million in district additional assistance, carrying over around $11 million. In 2016, the voters of Arizona passed Proposition 123, which was a settlement for the capital lawsuit that several districts in Arizona filed against the state of Arizona. And in that proposition, it allowed for 10 years of additional funding to make up for the years that we did not receive the amount we should have. So for this current school year, it'll be around $680,000. And that, again, we're in year 6, so we'll have that for 4 more years, and then that will drop off. You see the transfer of the revenues from M&O for K3 of the $50,000. When the recession happened, the state cut districts' capital funds. We were cut about 85% at that point of our capital funding. They've slowly restored that cut. However, for the 2021 school year, we still have a reduction of $784,000 of our capital funds. So in total, a budget just over 16 million. Next slide, please. The revenue sources, 77% of this will come from state equalization and 23% local funding. Next slide, please. So the funds will be used in the current year and also in future years for facility improvement and replacements, 6 million. For furniture, equipment, and vehicles, about 8.9 million. And then for textbooks, library books, instructional aids, just over $1 million this year for new online programming and textbooks. So in total, just over $16 million will be our capital budget. Next slide, please. Any questions on capital before I go into? So classroom site funds, otherwise known as Proposition 301, is based on, again, prior year weighted student count, but only Group A. So it's only weighted for the economy of scales of district size. So 12,622. And the allocation is $425 per student. Once this amount is calculated, it's distributed into 3 separate funds. Next slide, please. The districts are required to allocate the money in 3 different pots. The first is for teacher base pay. It's Fund 11, and that is 20% of the funds go into that fund. Performance pay is also known as Fund 12, and 40% of the budget amount gets allocated to Fund 12. And then the third pot is other, and it's Fund 13, and 40% of the allocation goes into that fund. So you see the allocations as presented on the first line. We do have some budget carry forward. The total amount of these budgets are only for classroom teacher salary and benefits. And in Fund 13, there are some instructional aids assistance that we pay for, but the majority of this money is for teachers, classroom teachers. The revenue source is 100% sales tax. So as we know, we're issues with the economy, the pandemic, sales tax is declining. So this is something over the next couple of years, we really will need to monitor and adjust how we're using these funds. And I mean, again, it's mostly teachers, but as it declines, we would anticipate the amounts declining in the future also. Next slide, please.
Wendy, before you move on past that, this budget carry forward, just so that I understand and everyone watching understands, that this is money that we have saved, if you will, from prior years, and we're able to subsidize now what will be lost over the next several years to maybe not make us whole, but make us closer to whole.
So,
Is that basically how that works?
so Proposition 301, when it first started, the first year, this fund was what was considered cash controlled. And no one knew the amount of money that would be received. So districts were hesitant to allocate it out in a contract when before the year even started and you had no idea how much money you'd receive. So we actually used to have a year's balance in these accounts. So over the last few years, we have dipped into that carry forward, but it would be there for future years.
For us to, as it decreases, potentially ours wouldn't decrease as much because we have some carry forward.
Right.
Right. So I mean, we know that it will decrease, but potentially because of your wonderful conservative nature and have saved all this money, not saved it all, but have sort of been knowing something like this could happen. Potentially, it will not be as great of a loss as it would have been had we not had any reserve.
Right. And if we go back to the recession, the funding for each of these, the funding per student was actually up to over $400, and it declined as low as 125 over the next couple of years. And that's where a lot of this fund balance went to, was trying to keep those dollars higher, even though the amount that we were allocated went down to 25%.
Right.
So yes, this will help mitigate some of that drop.
And just as a very rough estimation, based on the balance that we have right now, how long as it declines, how long will we have before we no longer have a carry forward balance? I know that's a big question, but
it will depend on the adjustments we make. So next year in the spring, once we know what the new amount is per student,
Sure.
we'll really have to look at the amounts that we are allocating out for teachers
okay.
and determine then how much, if any of that, we want to use.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wendy, can you clarify as well? Are districts able to transfer 301 monies to any other pot?
So,
I mean, like outside of 301.
right. So the question is, can we transfer these funds to other pots or use them in another way? And no, currently we cannot do that. This is all written in statute and it was passed by the voters, and then legislation a couple of years ago extended the original Proposition 301, but no, it's very specific in the Arizona revised statutes of how these funds can be used and how they have to be divided out. All right, next slide, please. So the base pay, Fund 11, for the 2021 year, teachers will be paid $1,900. Again, this is the classroom teachers that are paid from these funds, and that is split out with their paycheck every pay period. Performance pay is Fund 12, $4,000. There are 3 goals that they have to meet, and if they meet all of those goals, they are paid out. Normally, we get that processed in the end of June or middle of June for them. The other fund, Fund 13, $3,100 paid to each teacher. Again, it's paid out with each pay. A school with 500 or more students receives 2 instructional assistants to help with interventions with math or reading. And then a school with less than 500 students receive 1 instructional assistant to assist them. Next slide, please. So again, just to cover the adjacent ways, we're looking at $626,101 for White Tanks Learning Center. Prior year tax was 0. Estimated impact on a home would be $6 for a $100,000 home. Next slide, please. Other funds that the district have are what's called cash controlled funds. So we have to have the cash to be able to expend these funds. So the first is our food service, about 4.5 million. The funds come in from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and also from parents paying for student lunches and breakfast. Community education, 4.8 million. This is our before school, after school care, and also our preschool program. Debt service, about $6.4 million. This is to pay back our investors that purchased our bonds. So after the voters authorize us to sell bonds, we sell them to the investors, and then we start making interest and principal payments to them, just as we would as a mortgage. We pay them twice a year. Federal entitlement grants, 3.8 million. So these are our Title I funds, some IDEA for our special education students, and also the CARES funds are in here also. And then bond building, about 1.5 million left in that. And that is the funds that we received from the investors. So we receive the money from investors and then we pay it out as we do construction or other services over the years. So there's still 1.4 million, 1.5 million there. Any questions on those? Okay.
Just because you brought up the CARES funding, I want to make sure that I understand. So we know the allocated amount for some of the CARES money. We don't know, obviously, the governor and some of the other grants that he's offering. We don't know whether we will get them or if we do, how much that will be. But what we do know is that it's going to cost a heck of a lot of money, right, for us to open up schools and have all of the extra things that we need, whether it's staffing changes or safety, precautions or whatever. Where within this, how do I put this? Where does that money come from if it goes over that amount we're already allotted, or we don't spend that? How does that fluctuate? Because we don't know what we don't know, but we do know it's going to cost us X number of dollars to open schools this year, which is over and above what it normally would. So how do we manage that without, because we're not showing any of that here, that there's any sort of extra line item for COVID-19.
So the CARES money that is included in that amount is around 600,000. So the original allocation from the state was about 774,000. And so I'm considering that we're going to expend some of that in the current year. So some of the costs we've already incurred. And then next year that we're in, we'll have around 600,000 to spend.
And when you say next year, you mean the year that started July 1, right? I mean, this
So
next year that we're going into, right? I understand what you're saying.
The current year. So we'll use those funds first for any PP&E, disinfecting supplies, some training, things like that. And after that, it's back to our maintenance and operation funds or other rainy day monies that we have.
Okay. And this does, like I said, this doesn't include some additional grants or funding that we are possibly able to get. So this number could go up if we are able to receive any of the money that the governor has set aside for schools. Is that right?
So the governor's, the funds that were included in the governor's second order, executive order, are stabilization money. So we would be losing the money in the M&O fund already based on enrollment. And then what that's doing, his funds would just be stabilizing that. So it's not really in addition to like where we think we are today, it's to stabilize where we think we are today. Does that make sense?
Okay, it does. But if he has allowed us to have different models in terms of online where we would still get the funding for a student that we normally would get, and we have a model where they're in person, so we're able to count them, how would we be, why would we be stabilizing that? Why would there be a discrepancy if we're able to count all the students as we thought we were going to a year ago? What kind of funds would be stabilizing?
So it's to help stabilize a decrease in enrollment because statewide districts have seen students leaving to go to online programs. So some of his fund is to help stabilize that. The other is the in-person, we are funded at 1.0, a full ADM. If we're in distance learning mode or hybrid or an online learner, we're only funded at 95%. So our ADM number will be lower at our 100th day, or actually at our 40th day is when the grant would be available. So our ADM would be lower than what we think it is. And so his grant we could apply for would allow us to increase that ADM basically. We could either claim the extra 5% that we lost by doing online and distance learning and hybrid, or the other safety net is that we could only go down ADM by 2% from the prior year.
Okay. So in essence, we're not in a situation where our enrollment is declining. We're in a situation where our funding is declining because our students will not be in the classroom. And so that difference in 100% funding versus 95% funding is what he's going to stabilize. We don't actually have less students. We just have less money for the same students we had last year.
we could have a combination.
Well, yeah,
But
you're right,
yes,
but we
it
don't
could be
know that
one or
going
the
into
other.
it, right? I mean,
Right.
we could, but if we had the same number of students, we would still have less funding. So that is going to stabilize, making us whole in the sense that we have the same number of students and the same amount of funding per student as we had last year.
Right.
Okay, so those monies probably cannot or wouldn't be used for additional COVID-related expenses because those are line item, that's in the M&O, which we have already said here of how we're going to spend it. So really we have $600,000 to make this work.
Yes.
Over and above what we normally have. Okay,
Yes,
got it. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Can I ask a question along those same lines as well?
Yeah.
So that stabilizer is only 600,000, correct?
No,
We don't know what that number is yet.
we don't know what that number is. yet.
Okay, so is there talk amongst the people, if we are forced back in an opening date, that 5% is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Do we know if those adjustments are going to be made based on that, or is it right now just sticking to the 17th or whatever districts are deciding to do?
So the stabilization fund is based on the 40th day ADM.
So we'll go all
So
the way
we
to
won't
there
know
before
until
we
the
know.
40th day where we are at.
Any word from the people that if we extend quite far into the calendar past the 40-day for opening, if that'll be adjusted? I'm just curious if there's a pulse of conversation.
I would say no, because as soon as we offer distance learning, we're
Mhm.
considered open and we are supposed to be reporting our
I
attendance
see.
beginning that date.
Okay.
So,
So our
while this-
5% will start then.
yeah, so the 95 will start as soon as we
Mhm.
start school.
Okay, thank you.
And then the 40th day, we'll just compare our 40-day average daily membership to last year's
And see
40th
what
day.
funds they're willing to give.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. All right,
Great. Is that all on the,
there was a couple more slides.
okay. It didn't seem like you were finished yet, but
No,
I
I
see the
wasn't.
agenda back up here. So I was thinking, oh, okay, we're done.
No, one of the things I like to do is look at our tax rates and the impact of the tax rates, so we have an idea what increases our taxpayers may see. So next slide, please. So the primary tax rate, I anticipate to decrease by 0.0052. That's kind of a combination of the increase for the adjacent ways, the 0.06, and then a decrease in the qualifying tax rate at the state level. So the state looks at the assessed value at the state level and then adjusts the primary tax rate based on that statewide. So they decreased it by 0.0583. The secondary tax, I'm estimating about a 0.1444 decrease. That's due to a decrease in the override, not only the amount, but also the assessed value. So if you think about it, the assessed value increased pretty direct, quite a bit. And so that decreases the tax amount because you take in a smaller amount, you're dividing it by a bigger piece. So it's going down a little bit. And then also debt service, our debt service payments decreased by over 500,000. So we're decreasing the tax rate by 0.103. Next slide, please. So I like to track a Residents in Dreaming Summit just to see historically the impact that we've had. So back in 1819, that was the first year of our 15% override. So those taxpayers paid $74 higher taxes. Last year, just less than $1 increase for them. And looking forward into the current year, it looks like about a $4 increase for that household. And that assessed value of their home is $183,673. Next slide, please. So in addition to that house, I look at 5 other properties throughout our district, looking at the assessed value to see if it increased. Years ago, the voters approved a measure that limited the increase to 5% per year. So even if your home value increased 20%, it can only go up for taxes 5% each year. So I like to monitor those houses and see how close are we getting? Is their market value catching up with their assessed value? And that I use that information when we're selling bonds to figure out the impact on the future tax rates. So 5 of these homes, the assessed value went up the full 5%. One of them did not. So one house or one home has caught up with the assessed value and the value of the home. So the tax rates vary here between $4 and $9 for those that did increase the 5%. And again, that is based, the $8 increase is on the home that's $350,000 assessed value. The home that did not increase as much is going to see about a $14 decrease. All right. Any questions on that? That's the,
No, I don't. Does anyone else have any questions?
Over the whole.
yes.
This on. It's really not more of a question, it's just more of a comment. And normally Kim would be here and I would lean over and I would say, hey, Kim, am I right on this? So I'm going to ask you
Okay.
at the fear of being again a novice. The base support, $49.39, that's what we get per student, correct?
Yes.
Is that 65 or is that 35 or is that the whole? Because you said 65% of it comes from our outside funding, 35% comes from local. Is that 39 the combination of both of those?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the state formula, the state sets that dollar amount per student that we receive.
That's what I thought, and I just
Yes.
wanted to make sure. And then I just wanted to mention that when you compare the surrounding states to us, everybody except for Utah is getting double what we are getting here basically per student. So I just wanted to point that out and just say that we need more money. I don't know where it's going to come from. Somebody needs to get on that. Okay.
We
Thank
all
you,
agree.
Wendy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Elaine. I've missed being in meetings with you.
Do you?
Your optimistic
This is
attitude.
why. This is why.
You just put it out into the universe and it's going to come to us. I know
Oh,
it is.
We're just going to chant about it now.
Yes, we are. We're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
We are. Thank you very much, Wendy. We appreciate it. Did you have anything else to add? Okay. Are there any other questions on budget or anything related to Wendy before we adjourn? Okay, then I move we adjourn the public hearing. I just need a second.
I second. Second participate.
Okay, Melissa seconds. We can do a combination. Tanya, I see that you are online as well. We're just going to do a all together vote here and then we'll do individual later in the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. All right, next I call the open meeting to order. We are going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. You guys will stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, to start us off, we have Shelley Hornbeck this evening talking about recognitions and celebrations.
Thank you, President Clymer, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning. It's my privilege to share 3 district-wide celebrations with us tonight. Celebrations are a hallmark of our deep commitment to a positive school and work culture. It's our opportunity to celebrate life events, individual achievements, and contributions to our school families. Our teachers use this conscious discipline ritual to celebrate with students every day. And we open all of our staff and administrative meetings with celebrations so that we can recognize excellence and promote cohesive teams. So tonight we've got 3 celebrations, starting with the Hot Community Foundation. As we prepare to open schools, the Hot Community Foundation has been right there by our side, helping to make sure that we are safe. HOT stands for Helping Others Thrive. This is a new group in the Southwest Valley. They're based in Victory at Verrado, but they've got membership across the region. And right now they've got a huge assembly team sewing masks. They've donated over 10,000 masks to healthcare and essential workers, and they are giving us 1,000 masks for our employees so that we can return to school safely. We also are celebrating the Rotary Club of Goodyear Pebble Creek. They have given us a grant to support our chief science officers. These are the peer elected middle schoolers who promote STEM in their schools and in our community. And the Rotary Club of Goodyear Peak gave us $1,000 to support our chief science officers. So tonight we celebrate and we thank them. And finally, we're uniting as a community to celebrate our brand new website. I hope you've all had a chance to go surfing this summer at lesd79.org. That's where you're going to find bright and fun and informative content. We moved away from the clip art and the stock photos. You'll find engaging images of our own students and staff. There's a wonderful new staff directory that we know will be so useful to all of us, an engaging calendar at the school and district-wide level. So lots of thanks to Laura Combs and Brad Cruz for leading this effort. They worked with webmasters across the district and a strong team at the district office in Linda Buswell, Amy Potopoff, Arabeth Gilliland, and Carlita Westrick. So we thank them for their hard work, and we are still adding some content to the website, working out a couple of kinks, but by and large, it's been warmly received by the community. So we are definitely celebrating our new website. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. I have launched many a website in my professional career, whether they were, transitions from one to the other or new ones. And I will tell you, it is no easy undertaking. So thank you to all of the district staff that worked on this amidst one of the hardest crises that we probably have ever gone through, and needed communication and mass communication more than ever before. So I know we've had our COVID-19 page on our website, which people consistently are going to. It's updated, on a daily or weekly basis. And this will just continue that effort of working to help people understand what's going on at the district, help the district clearly communicate. And again, seeing those pictures of our kiddos and our staff and everything, I think will make this a little bit easier as we start to see what our schools look like again, and remind ourselves how fun school is if we can ever get back there. Okay, thank you, Shelley, very much. We'll move on. Just want to remind people we are on 4A on the agenda if you are following along with us. Our governing board policy, BEDH, public participation at board meetings, has been suspended. Due to this virtual format, there will be no call to the public. Again, I encourage you, as many of you have done, please reach out to us either via telephone at the district office or email to the board members and or Superintendent Gunning and her staff for any questions, comments, or follow up on this agenda. I know we are going to hear more in our COVID-19 updates about opportunities for conversations with stakeholders and things like that. So there will be more opportunity for questions and feedback to come. Next, 5A, reports from administrators. We are going to go to host John Scudder to walk us through those. Hi, John.
Thank you, Danielle. Hello. Excuse me. Madam President, members of the board, I'm going to try to be brief tonight because I know we have a full agenda. If you look at this document in front of you, I suppose we're continuing the celebrations from Shelley. The Rostowski family gave us a very, very generous donation that's going to allow us to do this summer boost this summer. So starting next week from July 13th through 24th, we're going to have small group online sessions focused on foundational literacy skills. And these will be for our first, second, and third graders, again, throughout the district that need extra help with reading. We were able to identify them from our most recent testing, and it comes to about 700 students throughout the district. And maybe the most exciting part of this is it's absolutely at no cost to the district. This is completely from the donation by the Rostowskis. So we're very thankful to them. And that's all I have. So Madam President, you have our reports and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think it's really important for people to understand that we have, one, some pretty amazing community stakeholders in the Rostowskis, obviously, but also, other people that have come together to help us through this. I think knowing that summer is always a time when we're typically on vacation and rounding kids up is very difficult. This year, it became imperative for us to be able to reach out and communicate and begin to have some interventions for kids that we know, potentially struggled or just needed some extra help before school begins in August. So thank you very much for working that program and helping out 700 kiddos is certainly impressive. So I look forward to seeing reports from, when we're able to hear from that in August. I just had one comment on the reports. I know I want to keep this brief because I know we have some really important things coming up. But first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to everyone for writing these. Again, this is typically not the busiest time of the year. This year it is. So thank you for continuing to put that in your weekly things to do for us, because I think we get a lot out of it. I just wanted to say thank you to Melissa McComb and Kay Trammell for putting together. I thought it was really informative, the special education, all of the scenarios and what, you've really thought of every contingency and what's going to happen. And if this, then that, if this, then that. I think, our special education students are particularly vulnerable, not only from a safety or health and safety perspective, but an education perspective. And I think giving all of those families as many options as we can and still living up to our responsibility in terms of certain minutes with therapy and interventions and all of these things. It was really impressive to see all of that. So thank you for that hard work. I know I've heard from a lot of families, I think we all have, about what's going to happen with special education. They haven't heard about that specifically. So I would encourage people to read that report, because I think it's detailed, and I think it'll answer a lot of your questions about what planning has been happening behind the scenes for that. So thank you guys in the special department. I appreciate it. I'll open it up. Elaine, do you have any comments, questions? I'll just go one at a time.
Daniel, I was just going to also the special ed portion of this was excellent. So on your coattails as well. Thank you. And to Ron Stair, he had sent out some information before about how community ed was doing on the summer camps, and just nice to see that program was still running. And even with the kids having to wear masks, they figured out how to make that work. So kudos on that.
Absolutely. Melissa, do you have any comments or feedback?
I don't have any questions or anything. I just appreciate that everybody's been working so hard. This has been a crazy, not normal summer. And we know that whatever you had thought you were going to be doing this summer has been totally different. So I just appreciate all the work that you guys are doing and putting in, and taking time from that craziness to write up a report of what you're doing for us when you probably didn't have minutes to do that. So we just appreciate that very much.
Great, thank you. Tanya, do you have any comments or questions for either John or any of the reports?
Yeah, just, not to sound like a broken record, but I feel like I'd be remiss without, giving my thank yous also, not only for writing the reports, but also for the way that everybody, the reports just reflect a tiny piece of the work and the, thinking outside of the box and being flexible to change and changing course when necessary, and all the things that we have to do to make any of these plans happen. So it's just, like I said, talking about these reports is just an opportunity for me to see all of that and say thank you as a parent and a board member.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so that wraps it up. Thank you, John, very much for hosting us. We really appreciate the update on the summer school program. We'll move on to item 6A, which is our report from Superintendent Gunning.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the governing board. I will keep this very short. My time, I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for the number of hours that they've been putting in, for all the committees putting all their beautiful brains together, all of our leaders putting their brains together and trying to come up with so many solutions for our families and our staff members. So I want to thank you all for that. I want to thank Dan and the facilities department for just continuing on. Campuses look beautiful, they're nice and clean, and Litchfield's going to be really excited when they get to go back and see all the remodeling that is completed, because it absolutely looks gorgeous. So just thank you to everyone.
Great, thank you, Jody. We'll move on to reports from our governing board members. And again, I'll just go through this quickly one at a time. So if you have something that you want to add, please do. If not, you can pass. Elaine, we'll start with you.
Other than just a few things that we ended up doing so the community knows what we had accomplished this month, we had a retreat where we as a board got together to come up with some goals and kind of work through some ideas that we have of what we would like to accomplish all together. I thought that was a great time, a really nice time doing that. And a thank you out to everyone as well. Tanya just barely touched on it with the word flexibility, which I know I said a lot last time that we were here 5 days ago, which may be why it seems like it was a long week, because that was only, I think, 5. Just flexibility that everyone has given, that everyone will continue to need to have, and moving forward, definitely. Thank you.
Absolutely. Melissa?
So yes, I did the board retreat, and I thought that was fantastically great thing for our board to do all together. I really liked getting the feedback from everybody and seeing how some of us, like on how we were aligned on a lot of things and how we thought we were doing. And it was also interesting to see how we all might have saw some things differently. That was good. I thought it was good to kind of talk that out and figure that out as a group. I think we've all been busy just reading what everybody's doing everywhere and trying to, be prepared for tonight's meeting where we're going to figure out what we're going to do with our kids next year. And I think it's weighed on all of us. It's weighed on me a lot of what's the right decision to do. Like, how do I want to vote as a board member on the choices that we're going to be presented, and how does that align with the money we have, and what can we reasonably do versus what our heart wants us to do, but maybe financially we can't do. So I've been watching lots of different school board meetings and reading up on everything I can everywhere on different options and how schools are doing it, and trying to figure out how some schools are doing things, because I don't understand how they're doing some of the decisions they're making. But that's pretty much been taking up a lot of my time, probably all of ours. So.
Absolutely. I think if I never see another webinar on school education funding in my life, it would be too soon, but I'll just keep watching them. Tanya, what about you?
So, again, same thing, all of us, I think I've had several, Jody has been gracious enough to answer many texts and calls from me, help verify things, give me your 2 cents, so that when I am out there trying to sift through material, it's done as efficiently and as possible. Just knowing that making plans and then remaking plans and remaking plans, maybe our our lot at this point. But yeah, and then again with the retreat, I missed a little piece in the middle there. I had to go to work and come back, but it was long, but it was a great, really good meeting. I'm glad that we did that.
Thank you, Tanya. And I will state the same. We were all here together and for the board retreat. And for those of you that don't, really know what that would be or didn't have a chance to look at the agenda, I think it's hard to imagine that this group of people could step away for a whole day from COVID-19 and figure out, we still have a district to run, and we still have, staff that we employ, and all of these, things that we need to talk about for the next year to 5 years. And I think that was a really good time to sort of just put the brakes on the craziness and the chaos that has become our daily lives, dealing with the coronavirus and the effects on our students, and really sit and think about we still have goals, we still have a vision and dreams for the district, well beyond this. So how do we start to, put those down on paper and remember that this year is not done yet, even though it feels like it's been a year over the last month. We still have a lot of things that we, want to accomplish and will accomplish despite all of the disruption. So yeah, I think the board retreat was really great. As Melissa said, we've been researching and watching other boards and, reaching out and communicating and really trying to decide what is best and what truly are our options. And, I think we take these decisions extremely seriously, and I think have really appreciated everyone that's reached out to us. it's hard, I think, to write an individual letter, pouring your heart out about something as important as your own safety or your child's safety or the safety of your job or something like that. So please know that we read them all and we appreciate and really do take that into consideration when we're making these decisions. So they don't just go into a big email black hole over here. We actually read them and try to do what we can to get you to the right person if it's not us. And if it is us, really sit with that information before we make decisions. So thank you for those of you that have reached out. We do appreciate it. Okay, that will wrap up our reports for this month. Next 7A, we're going to discuss consent agenda. If there is not anything that anyone would like to pull off the consent, I will move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second.
Thank you, Melissa. Again, I'm going to do this as a whole. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Consent agenda is approved as written. Okay, this will take us to, make sure I'm not missing anything. 14A, first reading of policy revision GBEF, staff use of digital communications and electronic devices, and also the use of technology resources in instruction. And then Shelley Hornback will walk us through this.
Thank you, President Clymer, members of the governing board. Thank you so much. Tonight, we invite you to review our proposed updates to our social media policies. You'll see minor changes in policies GBEF and IJNDB. And we are also offering 2 new regulations and a new exhibit. These proposed updates reflect the multi-layered platforms that we use to connect with our students, our families, and our community. And by updating these policies, we can strengthen our staff training with clear expectations about how and when our staff members interact with students, families, and the community when they're in an online setting. So you have our proposed updates. Tonight is considered our first read. So we welcome your questions and your comments tonight, and we will return for a second read and a request for approval at a later time.
Great. Thank you very much, Shelley. Does anyone have any questions? I'll just open the floor for discussion. I mean, I will say, very well done. I think the world of technology and social media and trying to rein in a district that is ever growing and ever changing and adding schools rather consistently is difficult to keep all of that together and make sure that we have one voice and one vision and making sure that we're representing our brand well. So nice job on these. I think this is probably the first of many over the years revisions that we will see just based on the way technology and information is going. So anyway, nice job. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or specific comments to this? Okay. As Shelley mentioned, this is the first read. So if there are any questions, this will come back to us a second time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to 14B, COVID-19 update from departments and committees. Looks like John Scudder, you are back in the hot seat.
Yes, ma'am. There are a myriad of things to figure out as we think about opening a school in a normal year. This year has made that challenge exponential. Luckily, we have an amazing group of people, over 100 that have been working in committees, seeking all kinds of input. I firmly believe nobody's wiser than all of us, and there's been a lot of input. We look forward to a lot more, but that being said, we're going to have some brief updates from each of our committees, and we're going to start with Karen Williams from the Health Protocols Committee. Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Scudder. Thank you, President Clymer, members of the school board, and Superintendent Gunning. The item that we were tasked with was looking at the different health protocols. And what we did is looking at the CDC guidelines, also looking at the roadmap to return. We created 3 main areas that we were focusing on. The first being promoting behaviors that reduce spread. So all of the items talking about staying home when appropriate, hand washing, social distancing, all of those things that we know are going to keep us healthy in the schools. The second area that we focused on was preparing for when someone gets sick. So this was looked at to determine if students, staff, employees become sick during this time, what are the protocols going to be? We're fortunate to get to work with our head nurse, Nurse Rebecca Shearer, and she also got input from other nurses around the district to think about what would some appropriate and feasible protocols be. So they were looking at those, again, referring to the CDC, and they are actually still currently working on some different forms and documents that they will utilize with within our schools. So these include isolating and transporting staff or students that we may suspect are COVID positive, advising staff and our families when this comes up in our schools in whatever form that is going to look like, and also notifying the health officials at the State Department, because that's something that we are required to do as well. The final area that we focused on was knowing that this is going to be quite a bit of new information. We need to focus on training for our staff, for our families, and also for our students. So again, this is going to be where our nurses are going to have a big role. We identified the specific areas that we feel our staff are going to need to be trained in when they're on campus, again, regarding all of those items that I just previously spoke about. Training for nurses. We want to make sure that our nurses are on the forefront of knowing what best practices are in the health field. And actually, another item that came out of this work was one of the school nurses actually created a website that the school nurses can refer to get information, not just on COVID, but actually on other topics like, for example, diabetes or asthma. So that's something kind of exciting that came out of this discussion. So lots of training for our nurses because we know that they're going to be the ones primarily training our teachers, our staff, which will then be trickled down to our students. So we want to make sure that we have the most accurate and up-to-date information. And then finally, education for families. We want to make sure that our families are aware of all the safety measures that we're putting in place to keep their students safe. We want to be transparent. We want to let them know the different things that they can do at home to help keep their students safe. And again, what we're doing at the schools to ensure that it's a safe environment for those students. So those are the three areas that we looked at. And then one other additional, as you start working on this, you think of other ideas. So one additional part that we put into this was looking at different resources that we could share with teachers. Those could be videos on how to wash hands appropriately to share with their students, social distancing, all those areas that we know students are going to need to be educated on. We also are putting together some PDFs. There's lots of PDFs on there that can be posted in the classrooms, in the nurse's office, showing appropriate measures to keep safe. And then also looking at some activities. So activities that the teachers may do with their students around the safety. And then we're also creating resources, a resource document for the same areas for our leaders on campus as well. So that kind of sums up what we were working on. It's still a work in progress. We're still waiting on information from the State and Maricopa Health Department. And of course, direction from the board to make sure that it's accurate and correct, but definitely work in progress, but I feel like we've gotten a lot done. Are there any questions?
Yeah, actually, I had a question. Do you know, and I'm sure it'd be way too soon to really know, but would we ever have any access to either testing kits when we have somebody that we suspect, or even like a pathway to testing? So if we had somebody we suspected, we could give them something where you go to this place, you can get the testing done, because access to testing is a huge problem. And so I just didn't know if there was anything available or potentially coming online or anything like that.
Actually, I believe that is one thing that our nurses have worked on. They're pulling together different places around metropolitan Phoenix where people can get tests. Is that what you're referring to? Like outside places where people can get?
Yeah, either. I mean,
okay.
just having, either having, the ability to do it ourselves or, at the nurse's office or whatever,
Yeah.
or like I said, a direct segue, to get somebody to a testing place that would actually do the test. Because one of the issues is, there are all these criteria that need to happen.
Right.
There's all these criteria that need to happen. And, we may send them somewhere and they might not do the test. And then,
Exactly.
they don't get it. So,
Well,
it's been an issue.
one of the protocols that the nurses are working on is once a student comes to the nurse's office, to the health office, suspected of showing various symptoms, and we know that there's various symptoms: fever, cough, all these different symptoms that we've heard of. Once they come to the nurse's office, the nurse will, as the professional, as the expert, will kind of triage them to determine their symptoms, and they are going to actually have it's called a case form. Got it directly from CDC, and it lists the different steps that the nurse will go through to check the student. And again, feeling if the student we feel is, and this goes for staff members as well. So if we feel that the students or staff member could possibly have COVID, then we will isolate them right away, make sure that they're not around other students or staff. And then, yes, we will definitely also recommend that they go to a testing site, since we, at least right now, don't have the ability to do any testing on site.
Dr. Fitzer, maybe you know a doctor that can help us with that pathway to testing.
Yeah, that's right.
I wish. We're in the same boat as everybody else.
Yeah. Any other
All right.
questions?
Thanks.
Yeah, I had one question. First of all, thank you very much. I know this work is never ending. So what you think today will be different tomorrow. So
Yep.
Thank you for being vigilant and continuing to plug away at this. You did say one of the important components, obviously, is communicating these protocols and the differences, and as things change, to both our staff, which is a little easier internally, but to parents. So how do you foresee that happening? I know probably some communication prior to the school starting, just to let people know what they are, but I'm assuming even after school starts or begins, whether that's online or in person or what have you, how do we continue as these protocols change? How do we continue to communicate to let people know things are changing, or this is what to expect if your child does come to school?
Well, fortunately, we have the advantage of having Synergy, which allows us to use In Touch, which allows us to send out emails to all of our students in our system. So we'll definitely be utilizing email, as we have been, all along. I know that we have the COVID webpage on our website. So I'm assuming that that'll still be present, and we'll direct parents, families to look at that website for further information. Web pages, I know that a lot of schools have used like their PTO web pages to disseminate information. And then if we need to, we can also do a mass phone call message. Again, with our In Touch system, it allows us to send phone calls, texts, or email messages. So we'll utilize whatever we have at our disposal to communicate to parents.
Great, thank you. I think that's going to be really important, and
Yeah.
we will see that we will hopefully fall into the over communicating category, even though I know that's a lot of emails or text messages. It'll be worth it as things, continually change over time. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're ready for the next committee update. This is going to be the physical distancing team, Jenny Tasson and Leslie Willis.
Good evening, President Clymer, governing board members, and Superintendent Gunning. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. And we ran our committee under the guidance and support of Megan Duplain. She was really a great resource for us to go to when we didn't know quite what the question or the answers were, even what our questions were. So we appreciate her support throughout all of this. Principal Willis and Principal Lewis and I started this committee with the purpose of determining protocols, distancing protocols for when the board and Superintendent Gunning determined that it's safe for us to return to campus. So again, these are all just suggestions for when we do return and when that's been determined safe for us to return. Our first step in this committee was to really look through the documents that were shared with us by the CDC and some of the recommendations. There was a great webinar that we were able to watch that had superintendents from across the nation just giving suggestions on how to determine the different types of risks that there are in physical distancing, and then also the mitigating measures that you would put into place to lessen those risks to the best of your ability. So we took that documentation and really started to review those and established first the settings that you would have in a school environment. And that would be through the lens of the students, but also the teachers, because we wanted to keep in mind the safety of everybody. Once we were able to establish the settings, and again, that was always morphing and changing when one of us would forget. I think one of the biggest things we forgot was like lockdown, and that came from one of our teachers on the committee. So the document was always morphing and changing as we were meeting with the many minds that put this document together. But we were able to, once we established those settings, reference this great matrix that was provided by the CDC. And it utilizes 7 descriptors to help you determine where the risk factors lie. So I'm sorry if I keep looking in one direction, but my screen is on a different part of, in a different part of my room. But it broke it down into high risk situation, a moderate risk situation, low and some risk, and then new normal risk. And we were able to determine those through a matrix of 7 different descriptors. And once we were able to determine where that risk might lie, that's where we started to brainstorm the mitigating measures for each of the settings. Once we completed that document, we sat with Megan again, and she gave us some input and asked questions. And then we were able to meet with our amazing team of teachers that represented middle school, elementary school, gen ed teachers, and specials teachers. And they gave us some great things to think about. They gave recommendations and some considerations that, again, we weren't able to think of. So we went back to the drawing board, added some of those recommendations and considerations, and then met with them a second time to really go over a final document that we were ready to present to our cabinet. And from there, and I think Megan mentioned this on, I believe it was Friday, where we were able to create a document of non-negotiables that all personnel or all principals will follow on their campuses, but then also on the other piece of that document would be considerations for each campus, because each campus is unique in many different ways. But there are definitely some non-negotiables that were determined important by our cabinet, which included, you know, Superintendent Gunning and Megan Duplain and Gina DeCoste. Many heads were in that room that day. And again, that's still a working, living, breathing document as we start to hear and learn new things each day from the news or whoever we're hearing from, CDC. So that has changed quite a bit, even in the last couple of days. But overall, I think we have a good general handle on what the non-negotiables will be for when we do return to campus. So do you have any questions? It's a lot of information, I know, but.
I'm sure we have some questions here in the room. So Elaine, you're giving me the look.
I was giving her the look, mainly because I wanted to jump in here. And Jennifer, wow, I mean, what a collaboration that you guys have put together. And so when we 5 days ago or last month are talking about committees and what are they doing and what's happening, this is exactly what they have been doing and what has been happening. And again, to your point, flexibility within this document, it really sounds like everyone was involved, and I don't think you can ask for more than that. So no questions, just gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Melissa?
I don't have any questions right now. Sorry, okay. I'm trying to process all that. I mean, I went, like, we got this information, like what they were putting together before, and I appreciate all the work that you guys did. This is no easy task to figure out how you're gonna make this all work so our kids can be there and be as safe as possible. And also, especially our teachers are safe, because we know that that's a concern. Like we have to make sure that everybody that's on our campus is the safest as they can be. So I just really appreciate all your hard work, but I don't have any questions right now.
Okay. I will ask one question, and really just to give you a chance to explain. And Jenny, I don't know if this is you, Megan, this is you, or Jody, anyone just sort of chime in. But I know that we have an understanding, right, of CDC guidelines because nationally they've sort of been broadcast, and they're very broad and very general and not specific for schools necessarily. Some are, some aren't. And while we would absolutely love to follow every guideline and every idea of how to keep kids safe and all of that kind of stuff, as you said, there are different levels, or there's some sort of like, mitigating circumstances of how we can be as safe as we possibly can. So just briefly, if you can, anyone who wants to answer, kind of just walk us through to sort of assure our families and our parents and our staff that while you may look at a document online from the CDC, or you may see something that someone has put out from a national basis and said, this is the only way that we can do it. That there are actually a lot of other things that have been given to us, whether it's from our local health department or other resources that we've put together that said, okay, here's what we're going to do, right? Knowing what we're going to be working with in terms of numbers of students, but also realizing we want to keep kids safe. How did you work through those guidelines to say, here are non-negotiables? And here is what we can work with our, sort of safety professionals and say, this is where we can, make some changes that fit based on what our individual campuses need.
So I'll jump in, and then I want anybody else, especially Leslie and Jenny, who let me just say, and Sarah Lewis and their team, just the amount of details they had to consider, the amount of time that this consumed them, walking classrooms, setting up classrooms, going back to the drawing board, just exorbitant. But they were committed to this because it's one of the most critical things, in my opinion, is that we have to prevent this, right, as much as possible. So they were thinking of every preventative measure they could put in place. But Danielle, you're right. President Clymer, you're right. When we hear things that you have to be 6 feet apart or you have to have masks on, we then worked with our local Department of Public Health, Maricopa County Department of Public Health, and got recommendations from them because they were working with schools specifically. Okay, if you have a classroom of this many, how do you stay apart? What's a realistic way? And what are other mitigating factors you can put into place? So masks, cohorting children, teachers rotating to decrease the amount of cross-contamination that there might be. So those were all the mitigating factors we had to put in place to make sure we had layers of support. For example, if we couldn't have 6 feet apart, we had masks. If we couldn't, and just making sure that all those other factors were so solidly put in place that we could say, we don't have this, but we can do this, and this. And so their document, as you review it, goes into those factors. Like, at this point, the kids might be 4 feet apart, but what are the expectations at that time? They have their masks on, that they are cohorted, that there is staff there guiding, coaching, teaching, and supervising, and just really talked through down to the last detail of every factor we can control in that moment to provide as much safety as possible.
I think that's a great point in the sense that I know we tried to be as honest as possible when we put out the various scenarios of what a classroom would look like. We may or may not be able to reduce class sizes. We may or may not be able to maintain 6 feet at all times. Because we put 3 to 4 feet doesn't mean that they're not going to be at 6 or 8 feet half of the day. But if at any point in time, we wanted to be really transparent and really upfront and say, this is what we, expect to happen. So to your point, when they're in a situation where they maybe have less space, they will have on masks or shield or whatever that might be. They may be in a smaller group setting, that kind of thing. When we can have, more distance, then other things are relaxed. So I think it's just important to know that while we may not hit some checklist, right, that is on the internet of every single safety regulation for every single classroom, I think it's important that we will hit as many of those at any given time that we possibly can. And when we can't, there will be layering of safety measures to make sure that if we are not 6 feet, we are wearing masks. If we are not doing this, we are doing that. So anyway, I just want to be really clear about that because I know there's a lot of hard work and probably a lot of arranging and rearranging desks to see exactly how many you can fit in a room and how many different ways you can do it. Even, the directions of how you're going to walk in a hallway that are being considered. So thank you very much. I just really wanted to.
And one
make
more
that point.
thing also that we had to think about too, and the team really was good at, is that we can't make our children sit all day, right? They have got to move. We know what's good for their brains, right? Like with conscious discipline, all the work on brain science, we know we have to give them opportunities for movement and play and socialization. So how do we allow that while putting on the layering of safety? So that was something that the team really prioritized as well, because our children, we know for their mental health and for their educational health, right? For learning, they have to have movement and socialization in a happy, safe, and loving and connected community. So the team and I had to really think through those things and how will we provide for those.
That's great. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate all your hard work.
All right, I think, is Leslie Willis going to go as well, Jenny Tassin, or is that it for physical distancing?
That's it for now, unless Leslie has something to add that I missed.
Did awesome, Jenny.
Thank you, Leslie.
Very good, thank you very much. So we'll move to our Special Education Committee with Carol Somsky.
Thank you, John. Thank you, President Clymer and the board. So you got the document that Melissa and Kay sent. So that was really the one that had the most detail in it. What we did is we went through that and talked about specifics as a team. For the first thing we discussed, of course, was all of the different scenarios for opening the school and for how that affects the different areas of special ed. For the self-contained and the resource programs, we really talked about how much flexibility is going to be needed in scheduling, especially if we go to full return and hybrid models at the same time, because it's going to take a lot for both self-contained and resource to schedule the kids and get them the services that they need during the school day. And especially a lot of flexibility in scheduling if the teacher on each campus has to do both models at the same time, which is an option. As far as the Digital Learning Academy, we talked about special ed. If special ed kids are included in that academy, then there will be a special ed teacher that is dedicated to the academy also. And then we talked about the inclusion programs. Again, those programs are for the full return would be inclusion kids would get what they need, but we also need to take into account the student needs and the parent concerns, especially with the hybrid model. So again, flexibility, that was a word that came up a lot. Related services, that was a little bit trickier because a lot of the related service therapists go to multiple campuses. Well, actually, I think all of them go to multiple campuses. And some of them, like the physical therapist, might go to many campuses in one day. So we were really concerned that we made sure that, again, the scheduling has to be taken into account in making sure that we reduce the number of spots that each of the people might be going to each day. And we're working on ways to maybe make sure there's adequate PPE for these therapists that are going to many sites, adding supplies so that, as again, I'm using the physical therapist because she goes to there's one physical therapist, she goes to all of the campuses. She needs equipment that she shares with all 14 campuses. Well, we want to make sure that she has extra equipment so that sharing is decreased. We also talked about the preschool program, the special ed preschool program. And so there was some concerns in that area about making sure the class sizes are manageable and that we ensure the safety of the kids and maybe additional staffing if that's needed to make sure that the ones get all the services that they need. Of course, we discussed our commitment to our special ed classified staff in order to support them. And especially as we move to hybrid, or if there happens to be a time when we're full closure, then we're concerned about those folks. We know, I know that I've heard the administration and the board are very committed to making sure that everyone is employed as best as we can with the constraints that we have. So we know that you're committed to that too, but we realize that both classified and certified staff have to be flexible, and that positions may shift across the district as needs are met. We talked about our medically fragile students, very concerned about them with the COVID, and the need to maybe take extra precautions, different PPE, you know, the masks that work for some kids may not work for them. So we need to consider extra measures and maybe different types of equipment that they need, as well as limiting exposure to outside classrooms and maybe providing visual supports with therapies as opposed to in person, so that the number of people that they see are decreased. And then lastly, we discussed parents, because if we go to hybrid or, you know, the full closure with online learning, a lot of our parents of special needs kids might need that extra support, and they might need the knowledge. So we need to be able to teach them how to teach their kids if that seems to be the case. So we discussed some ways to do that. And then of course, lastly, we discussed how we're going to measure all of this, how we're going to measure the minutes, how we're going to document these things, and how we're going to measure the student success and document that. And there's a lot more in this area, lots and lots. And we have a lot more, even after our meeting, there were more emails and more ideas and more suggestions. So we're, you know, we know it's an ongoing work in progress. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I know there's a lot to consider there. I'll open it up for comments or questions.
I think it's just a lot of information that anybody that's watching and listening right now has been waiting for, especially when it comes to special education. You know, the parents want to know, will their voices be a part of it? And from what I'm understanding, it will be a team involvement as to what direction everybody's going to go. And again, the board flexibility, especially with the PTs that are coming in that have to split that time and share the equipment. So lots of good ideas and again, collaboration. And I think that people who have students on their IEPs and 504s, that they'll find that they'll be included in the decisions that are going to be made. And I think that that's going to definitely make them feel a little rest assured.
Absolutely.
Melissa?
So this area is near and dear to my heart, as I have a child that's in the special education program in our district. And I have, as a parent, been able to talk with Kay about this stuff, this very subject of how we're going to make all these different scenarios work and what's the best thing and what's right for one kid is not right for another. So I appreciate that you guys are looking at every single way that this could be done and making sure that families still have the flexibility and the options, and that we're not just saying, if you are in the special education program, you must do this option, because it just might not work for that family for whatever reason. So I just really do appreciate all your guys' hard work, and the fact that you guys are making sure to include parents and everyone in those conversations and in those individualized plans for the kids is very important to me. So I'm just glad to see that we are doing that. This one has blown me away. I mean, everybody's worked really hard, but this is just such a tricky, hard thing to do, because these kids trying to meet their needs in one way and in another way, and they might not mesh together. So trying to find a way to bridge those two is so important. So I appreciate what you guys are doing to make sure that happens no matter what.
Melissa, you bring up a good point, and this is kind of a question, and I'm hoping I'm going to answer my own question. But so I know that we have sort of teams of people that review every IEP and all of these things. That is a combination of, you know, staff in our district as well as families and parents and things like that. So because we don't have as many special education students as we have traditional students, will there be sort of this, you know, discussion amongst every family in what is best for your child? So will that be able to happen prior to the start of the school year? So there'll actually be, you know, a recommendation from the district, whether it's through this IEP committee or whatever, that gives them options, but says, hey, you know, these are the services that you require or that you desire, and this is how we can best meet those. So you have every option, but, you know, kind of that conversation. So how does that happen? Obviously, knowing that things are, you know, ever changing, but because we have some medically fragile kids and, you know, people that are going to have to be working with them, how are we doing that with all of those families during this time?
Well, I am not exactly sure, but from what I understand from our initial discussions, and so I'm sure Kay or Melissa or maybe Megan can answer this more, that as we get more information and the student and the parents choose which model that they want to go with, then we will reach out as a team, the IEP team, the teachers, and let them know that these are the options and this is the way it's going to look. And then we can make decisions based on this, what the students need, what's in the IEP, the accommodations and everything to for the best fit, because it is a team decision about what we can give them.
Exactly, Carol. And the one layer on that, thank you, Carol, first of all, for explaining it in so much, I mean, in so much brevity when it's such a complex plan that you all are creating. But yes, exactly. And then one layer on top of that is that the special ed administrative team will be reaching out to all of the children who are medically fragile, to talk with their parents first about ideas, thoughts, any new updates from the doctor, and just getting a good pulse on where they're feeling their children, what their needs are for their child at that time. So then they can call IEP meetings for them first and foremost to ensure that we are meeting the child's individualized needs. And then from there, like Carol said, is that parents will have the choice. Of course they will, with any of the scenarios that we allow them to, like that the board is going to vote on tonight. And then the IEP teams, because each child, there's not a district IEP team, each child has their IEP team. So each child's IEP team will then be discussing with each other, and that's the parent, the teacher, the therapist, the child will be discussing how to, and if it is possible to meet the child's needs within that learning option. And if the team feels that comfortable, then what will that look like?
I also wanted to jump in real quick and just highlight one of the things you mentioned about the PPE, particularly for those teachers by nature of, they could potentially be super spreaders, right? So I'm really glad you thought of that. And I just wanted to sort of emphasize, there is a dramatic variation on how truly effective and what direction the PPE is, whether it's protecting you or protecting others. So I just wanted to make sure that when you guys make those decisions based on, for the people that are going to be going to multiple campuses and things like that, or exposures, with some of the kids, they're obviously going to get a lot more of the physical exposures than maybe with a regular classroom. So I just want to make sure that you guys keep in mind, not just being sure they have it, but they have the proper one to achieve the effect that we want. So, whether it's an N95 type or a face shield or, wear a cloth mask, maybe in this situation is just not going to cut it. So, that sort of thing. I just wanted to kind of bring that up and also say, I'm really glad that you are addressing that, because that is going to be really important for those people in that situation. And, the good news is it's not a gigantic group, but it excuse me, it will cost some money to do that, to do it properly.
Yes, supporting the needs of our children who are medically fragile has been on the top of our minds and hearts through all of this, and consulting with our attorney, consulting with ADE, consulting with other experts to make sure we're considering that everything we need to. And that's one of the main considerations that our attorney and other experts said is focus on the PPE. Let me back it up. Focus on the IEP team to look and see what's the doctor saying, what's the medical plan? Has the medical plan changed? And then now let's go forward. What mitigating factors do we have to look at for this particular child to consider bringing him or her back in a safe way? And PPE was one of the huge ones that comes out every time.
Thank you guys very much. Thank you, Tanya, for that. I think it's good. It's a good point that we need to remember there are going to be certain staff members and students that are going to maybe need a little bit more, a little bit extra, a little bit different. So making sure that we're able to provide that is going to be essential. John, we are ready for our next presentation, or that might be all.
Nope, there's still a few more to go. Our next one is going to be Phyllis Lucer is going to talk to us about the Critical Standards and Assessment Committee.
Thank you, John. Madam President, members of the board, and Superintendent Gunning, I am very pleased to speak to you tonight about the work that was done at the beginning of June with some wonderful teachers in identifying critical standards. And just to back up, the motivation behind the work came from Solution Tree's webinars on, it was called Minding the Gap. And it really centered on how do we focus instruction next year with the understanding that we are anticipating a potential COVID gap. And the work starts off with promoting the identification of essential standards. And we are very fortunate at Litchfield that a number of years ago, Amanda Acosta led a group of teachers in identifying essential standards for our district. So we already had that piece in place. The next piece that they recommend in order to do this work is to use data to drive some of the decisions. So we brought Brian in where he was able to identify what he termed highly correlated standards. And these were standards that he was able to correlate with the performance of students with merit and the performance with the students on our benchmark. And when they were showing proficiency and the connection between the benchmark and the merit test, he was determining which ones were highly correlated. So we were able to start with the essential standards and the highly correlated standards. Not in every case were the highly correlated are an already identified essential standards. So we were able to comb through those two different groups of standards. In some cases, they were overlapped, and analyze them for what makes them so important and what allows students to have success within the grade level, where we could confidently say when they left that grade level, if they had at minimum these standards mastered or proficient at, we could say that they've had a successful growth for that year. So that was the task that they were charged with, which, you know, is a big task. And they worked in this analysis within their own grade level. Once they were able to identify what their first draft of highly critical standards would be, we then had them talk within their grade level with their counterpart group, because we had a group of ELA and a group of math people working at each grade level to kind of concur and see if there was an agreement amongst them. Then we took it a next step further and asked them to speak vertically. So we would have third grade speaking with fourth grade and third grade also speaking with second grade, so that we could ensure that these standards were building upon one another. And the final result is they were able to identify what we're calling our critical standards. Now, I do want to emphasize, though, that we recognize that all standards are important. And also knowing that we've identified the essential ones and now we have these critical ones. So we basically have a prioritized set of standards. So this will allow us to be successful next year as far as starting off the year and allowing our teachers to have that common focus. It's also going to set us up for great success with our professional learning communities, because now we have these critical standards to be discussed in addition to our essential standards. We went one step further and we added learning progressions. So with each standard, we broke them down into a task analysis type of format. And that's going to allow teachers to be able to look at those critical standards and look at all the very minute specific pieces that need to be taught in order for that standard to be determine proficiency or mastery. That's going to really assist the PLCs as well, as far as identifying where that gap may be. So where a third grade teacher might have started in a normal year with a standard, they may have to step back a little bit and ensure that they front load or offer some prior knowledge that they normally would expect that maybe was not obtained because of the COVID gap that we're anticipating. So we're really excited to be able to have this for our teachers to really highly focus their instruction and also support our PLC process. I wanted to, in the end, kind of shout out to Leslie Willis and her custodial team, because they were wonderful in housing us. We had all of our COVID type of restrictions and expectations that her custodial staff was wonderful at doing for us, and our teachers felt very safe while they were doing this wonderful work.
That's great. Thank you very much. I think this is probably something that a lot of folks aren't talking about, right? I mean, we're talking about safety and how far apart we're going to sit and whether we're going to wear masks and what day we're going to start school, which are all very, very important things. And then you sort of forget about what are we actually going to teach kids when they come back? This is essential and critical. So thank you for going through this process. I know it was a lot of work and it's very time consuming, but I think it will be critical in identifying, as you said, sort of that COVID gap and what the needs are going to be, but also hopefully provide some essential training to our teachers when they come back, because, we're looking at a month, right, from right now. And I'm sure a lot of them are either watching this or sitting at home wondering, how are we going to do all of this? How are we going to, really get all of this done? And I think work like this is going to, put us 5 or 6 steps forward. So when they come back, you guys are going to be ready to tackle the really tough questions about how we're going to address gaps that we know are going to be there, and what resources they're going to have to do that. So appreciate that. I'll open it up to the board. Questions, comments, feedback?
I think this was the greatest use for our teachers, that we really had our teachers that are in the classrooms every day, knowing where our kids are, what they're teaching them every day in the classroom, so they know where the kids need to be. They know where the kids need to be when they come in normally and where they need to be when they're ending the year. So I appreciate that you had so many teachers working on this and really getting their feedback in this committee. And I would like to say, I think the best part was how you guys were working as a team, and that your first grade team was talking to your kindergarten team and your second grade team to make sure that that was that smooth transition through all those grades. You know where they are coming in from, you know where they're going at when they need to go to the next grade. So that was a great way to work as a team and make sure that everything is consistent always for the kids and for the teachers. So thank you guys for all that work.
I'll jump on that and say ditto and ditto. And thank you, Phyllis. It was great to be on the committee with you and the rest of the principals at the beginning of this. Excellent work.
Thank you.
Great. I don't think we have any other specific questions, but thank you. We know this is a critical piece to what we're going to have to do moving forward. And I know we're going to talk about some options for teacher training and whatnot coming up in our school start date discussion. So I think this is going to be a critical piece to that and how we use this information and data moving forward. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, President Clymer, our next presenter will be Candy Reyes with Staff Self-Care.
Hello, everyone. I'm Candy Reyes. I am the K-5 music teacher at Litchfield Elementary. I'm also the union president, and I was able to be on an operational team. I was looking at staff self-care plan because the AD provides us with a roadmap and says that it's very essential for us to make sure that we are looking at ourselves and making sure that we are healthy as well. And we're supposed to provide that for our staff. So on the team was Lori Kreista from Barbara Roby, kindergarten teacher, Jill Smith, who's a nurse at Belen Soto, Don Jones, the admin assistant at Thomas Heck, Jason Wall, the PE teacher at Mabel Pageant. And really our objective was to promote health and well-being for all of the staff. We want to make sure that we hit several different areas, such as physical wellness, mental, social, emotional health. But we also want to make sure we hit the anxiety that may come due to returning to school and all that brings during this COVID pandemic. So we had to figure out a systematic way to share the employee assistant program and also to provide different resources. So one of the things that our team came up with was to establish someone on each campus that they can be the point person to remind us, and that could be in a way of communicating during staff meetings or having an actual example of learning what to do to create our self-care plan and make it effective. We could also do a thing where we put it on the website, so we have somewhere for our employees to go to. Many times when teachers in normal situations are having need resources, it's kind of hard for them to find it. They'll reach out to a friend, and we want to kind of provide that where we feel like we're a school family and we know that person that we can reach out to. And with all the information that we're putting together, we're actually getting that directly from the roadmap, and we're also reaching out into our own employee assistance program. So that will all be laid out. It's still in the process of creating, but it looks really well managed that we can be able to all as an entire district be on the same page and consistently provide that reminders to all of our staff members to fill your own cup before you turn around. And we don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed. And right now that is what's going on. A lot of people are very overwhelmed. It's a lot of things for us to take in. So constantly, this isn't just for our staff, but it's also good for our administrators to create boundaries, establish routines, things like that. So we really want to communicate that out to the staff and make it part of our routine so that we can be held well. And we're hoping to get everything out ready for you. We just got to put in a couple more resources and things like that. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions? I have a comment, but I'll wait until.
I don't have a question. Just hello to my friend Candy Reyes. This is a perfect fit for you, I think. And keeping everyone happy is definitely a direction that I know that we all here are interested in. So thank you, my friend.
Definitely.
I am glad to see that we have this as a committee. Self-care is super important. We are really good at telling like moms, you hear that all the time now, we're telling moms and dads, and I mean, mostly moms, like make sure you take care of yourself first because you can't take care of your kids if you don't take care of yourself. Same thing with our teachers and our staff. If you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of our students. You're not going to be in the right mind state to teach and to fill our kids' buckets if your bucket's not full. So I'm glad to see that you guys are working on this. I think it's a great direction. And I agree. I think Candy is a great person to be spearheading this. So great job with the work you've done so far.
Thank you.
It's funny. I just have to jump on.
I just want to say I'm really impressed with sort of the strategic direction of it's not only a matter of we're just going to collect resources and we're going to put them up on a website, or we're going to have someone on your campus email you every week or month or whatever, and kind of if you want it, it's here. But your approach of no, we're going to remind you, we're going to constantly help you remember that, because there are times that's going to be forgotten, right? I mean, your students and your planning and your training and your own family and all of these things are going to be put before your own self-care. So I love the sort of, really sort of the action plan of we're going to be in front of you, we're reminding you and sort of, spoon feeding you these resources so that we can be kind of not only a landing board when you need someone, but also sort of a springboard to push you in the right direction when, you might forget yourself. So I think that was, a genius way to look at it. So thank you. Also, just thanks to all of the staff members. I know it's really hard to think. I mean, right now you're probably all sitting thinking, where am I going to be in 3 weeks? Like, what am I going to be doing? What am I going to do with my own family and my own kids and my own life and all of that? And you're, coming together and in all of this uncertainty, putting together a plan to take care of others. I mean, if that isn't the Litchfield way and isn't, how we take care of our teachers, I don't know what is. So thank you. I think this, reminds me and all of us that we are in this together. And if we don't take care of each other, we're going to have a really hard time making it through this. So kudos to you and the team. I really appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you. We're dedicated and really want to make a difference. Thank you.
I don't have any questions, but I felt I'd be remiss to not say ditto to what everybody else just said. It's funny, Candy, when you came up as the head, I was like, what? Like, you're not a perfect person, just like everybody else said. So clearly a good fit. And we know it's going to be, you're, doing a great job. And it is true. We've got to take care of ourselves. Otherwise, we can't take care of others, and just appreciate the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Candy. Madam President, I believe we're ready for Steve Best from Transportation.
Okay, Madam President Clymer and members of the board, Superintendent Gunning and Mr. Scudder, thanks for the opportunity to share the Transportation Department's recommendations for this upcoming school year. I have been a student transporter for Litchfield for the last 2 years, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So Director Sims assembled a task force to develop the recommendations for this coming school year for transportation. And our task force also consisted of parents, teachers, and transportation staff, including myself. We reviewed recommendations and took input from the CDC, the Arizona Department of Health Services, the Arizona Risk and Retention Trust, and other Arizona school district transportation leaders that Tommy talked to. First thing I want to talk about is social distancing. Social distancing, as you can imagine, greatly reduces school bus capacity. It reduces the district's ability to provide transportation to students. As a result of that, the transportation that we're going to be providing this year will be without social distancing. But face coverings, which, as everyone's aware, Maricopa County has mandated in the last couple of weeks, will be a part of that. And I'll explain what our mitigation strategies are going to be here. For the student transporters and monitors, we will be wearing a face covering, which will either be a mask or a plastic face shield when students are on the bus at all times. We're going to both disinfect and clean the bus after the morning, the midday, and the afternoon routes that we run every day. We'll also disinfect the bus between runs using a 75% alcohol wipe when time permits. We're going to also ensure that students are in assigned seats and that siblings from the same household will be seated together. We're also going to wear new disposable gloves when attending to each student. So if there's an issue that we need to, get involved with a student and we need to be in close proximity, we'll be wearing a clean pair of gloves, either the driver or the monitor. The students and other passengers, they're going to be required, of course, to wear either a mask or a face cover. Any students that are 6 years of age or older. And we're going to make a reasonable effort to have younger children comply with that also. However, we're not going to refuse a ride to a student with no face covering. We're going to have, along with our cleaning supplies, we're going to have a limited number of disposable masks that'll be available that we can provide to a student that gets on the bus without a mask. The transportation office staff will be available to communicate with parents on these standards for riding a bus and work with the parents to resolve issues of availability of masks, that sort of thing. Special needs students will be strongly encouraged to wear a face covering, except those students that might have sensory challenges and those students that have medical concerns that would be aggravated by a face covering. The buses themselves, we're going to disinfect and clean them as I described above. They'll be ventilated during seasonal times of the year using a combination of the air conditioning that's on the bus, by opening the roof hatches that are on the buses, and by partially opening selected windows to try to make sure that we're turning over the air in the bus as much as possible. We're also going to post signage that's provided by the CDC regarding the visible symptoms that might indicate someone having COVID-19, runny nose, cough, shortness of breath, or vomiting. The last thing I want to touch on is at the bus stop themselves or itself, the district is going to communicate the need to social distance at the bus stop with parents. We want to make sure that as the kids are waiting on the bus, that they understand the need to socially distance at that stop as well. Students should wait in a parent's vehicle if that's possible. And students will be asked to have a face cover available and ready to wear prior to boarding the bus. One other thing I'd like to add too is that we provided these recommendations, Tommy did, to Megan and to Superintendent Gunning a couple of weeks ago. And Tommy has already started the process by Zoom of talking to the transporters and to the monitors to give them a heads up on the kinds of things that'll be different when we do start transporting students. So he's already begun that process to communicate and begin the training process. So with that, if there's any questions I might be able to answer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time that's gone into that. Transporting as many kids as we do, as many miles as we do every day is a challenge on a good day. And adding in a pandemic certainly, heightens those risks for everyone. So I'll open up the floor to comments or questions.
So I know that we can't really make people wear masks when they're waiting for the bus before school, but you said that we're going to expect them to have a mask and ready to put it on to get on the bus. I think we should put out there, we expect them to wear a mask while waiting for the bus. Just throwing this out there, because as much as we would like to tell them to social distance, they are kids and they're not going to do it. Like, I just think we need to be realistic. Like, as much as we can advise them to do it, they're probably not going to as much as they should. So at least we can say, wear a mask while you're waiting for the bus would help with that.
Yeah,
We can definitely work with the kids on that.
Okay.
Great presentation. Something that was mentioned at the last meeting that wasn't mentioned in this report was that there would be the first open seat available for those who maybe didn't hear it at the last meeting. The first open seat directly behind the bus driver will be kept vacant in case of any type of symptoms that you may see.
That's correct. That is in our plan also, that we're going to train the drivers on, is to keep the first 2 seats on either side of the aisle directly behind the driver open, just for that purpose, as well as to put a little bit of distance between the driver and the students themselves.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, one not even question, a comment that I have. I think we all wish our transportation could be different. I think we all wish we could have, 1 student every other seat, but that's not a realistic goal. What I will say is I think, it's certainly appropriate for all of us as parents of children, whether you use transportation or not, to say if it is possible to transport your child, even if it's one way, there or back, any reduction in bodies on that bus is helpful. So we know there are parents and there are families that rely every single day on that transportation to get their kids to school. And we want to make sure that we can do that as safely as possible. So while I know it's not always possible to transport your kids, I do think it's important for us to know, or to really say out loud that if it is possible for you to take them, either direction or both, please do, because that will be a safer route for your child, your family, as well as the other children on the bus. Because if we can create more space on that bus, it allows our driver and all of the students that do ride that bus to be safer. So I will just put that out there. Secondly, I've had some feedback. So I just want to sort of make this clear. And again, Jody, you might want to jump into just from a district perspective, is we don't leave kids at the bus stop.
No.
So if a child looks sick or looks like they have a fever or is not wearing a mask or whatever, unless there is a parent there that can take them back, and that might be the situation. But for the most of the kids, it isn't. So we are going to take that child to school.
Absolutely.
Even if they are sick, even if they do not have a mask, what have you, we will try and do everything we can to get them the resources they need and get them to school, to contact their parents. But we are not in a position, nor would we ever be, I don't think, to leave students at a bus stop unattended without a parent or without, someone to take them back. We don't know what situation they're going. They might have a parent at home at that time. So we need to contact them to make sure that that child is safe. So I did have some community feedback as to why would we even take them if they're sick. That's the reason, because we don't know if they have a parent or trusted adult at home to care for them. And, we take our responsibility very seriously that we want everybody to be safe, even if they are, potentially sick or whatever. So
that's exactly right. And that's why we're leaving those front seats open, so that if someone does board the bus that is not feeling well, we're not going to diagnose, but, we have a seat available, and we are going to have a protocol to be able to communicate in a respectful way back to dispatch, so that the school is aware that a student is coming to school that they need to, have some attention to.
That's a great point. Good communication, so they know ahead of time when they're receiving the bus that they may need some additional staff or someone to escort that child to the nurse, which I am sure we have done many times before on a bus.
Yes.
It just seems like in these situations, seems like the protocols need to be a little bit more spelled out so everyone feels really clear about how that's going to work. So Steve, thank you very much for your work. We really appreciate it, your time and energy putting that together.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add something really quick to what you were saying? That's not just that we would never do that because it's not like a nice thing or a good thing to do with kids, but it's a legal thing, right? Like we legally couldn't just leave them there. Right.
We would never leave a child alone in that situation, COVID-19 or not.
All right, moving along. John, who's next?
Very good. It's Wendy Qualls with the finance update.
Thank you, Mr. Scudder, President Clymer, members of the governing board, and Superintendent Gunning. I am part of our finance and budget team, and we were tasked with the different CARES funds that are coming in to determine priorities for those funds. So the first one was announced in May by the Arizona Department of Education. Those funds are distributed to the districts statewide based on their Title I allocations. So for our district, that's $774,000. So as we listened to the summaries of different committees, we took note of the different PPE that was going to be needed, any additional cleaning or disinfecting supplies. So we have reserved $260,000 of the budget for PPE and cleaning materials, and also any equipment that we may need to disinfect. We also have budgeted $80,000 for online instruction. We needed a new instructional platform and also some other programs to be available. As far as salaries and benefits, we have about $434,000 planned. As you can see, there's been over 100 people working during their summertime planning for the school reopening. So it will be to compensate them. Also to look at other programs to help students that need assistance catching up on their academics, some tutoring funds, and also some transportation funding during the summer where we are delivering meals. And then also training. We know our staff is going to need a lot of training, not only related to safety protocols, but also how to improve all of our instructional programs. And these funds will be available to be spent until September 30th of 2021. And we can adjust as we go if we find out that we need more PP&E, but maybe we don't need as much services, then we can adjust as we go along. So we will have until September to spend funds. Back in March, when schools were closed, many school districts shared concerns about student enrollment, students going to other districts or online programs, not knowing the impact of offering distance learning or an online learning program. And that's where in the governor's executive order, the second one, he brought in some additional funding, the stabilization funds through, again, the CARES program. To determine the amount that we would receive from that allocation would be, we'd look at our 40th day count in the current year, because we're current year funded in maintenance and operations. So we'd look at our 40-day average daily membership, compare it to our 100th day of last year. If we do decline, we would be able to recoup up to, it'll fund us up to 98% of that difference. So with that information, he also did talk about the different learning models. So the hybrid learning model, we would be funded at 95%, along with any online learning or distance learning at 95%. So these funds could also be used to fully fund a student, to move them from the 95% funding level to the 5% funding level. So just as an example, if we think about that, our maintenance and operations is current year funded. So it is based on our 40th day count of the year that we're in. And that's what he's protecting us from, the stabilization of those funds. But as I talked through our proposed budget, I mentioned a couple times there were funds that are based on prior year average daily membership. So there is no protection for those funds going into to the 21-22 year. So those would be our capital funds, our M&O override, Proposition 301, and instructional improvement. So I did an example, considering if all of our students do return, but 33% participated in hybrid, 24.2% did digital. When we're looking at 2021, for those 4 funds, we'll have a decrease of about $600,000. So just to give you a general picture, yes, we are looking at M&O being stable and we're good for this year. Going forward, there will be reductions. Another thing I just wanted to update you on was when we're talking about the next examples of when do we reopen, how do we reopen, the timing, we really need to consider how are we going to retain our families. So I did an example, if 10% of our families go to online or other districts for the 21-22 school year. So again, another one we're looking out another year that's based on our 2021 ADM. We would lose around $2 million if those 10% leave this year. If they don't return in 21-22, so then we're into current year M&O funding, we'll be looking at over a $6 million cut. So this is a long-term issue, but I just wanted you to have that information as you think about the different scenarios tonight.
Rewind just a second. I understand the 6 million, the 2 million. What did you say the 2 million was for?
So 2 million would be 21-22, the decrease in our capital, the M&O override, 301 funds, and instructional improvement, because it will be based on our true 40th day ADM this year, not the stabilized amount that the governor's.
Okay.
And that those two numbers, again, the 2 million and over 6 million were if 10% of the students did not return.
Okay.
Is
that all the presentation, or do you have more? I have some questions. I just didn't.
Questions.
Okay. Do you guys have questions, comments?
I have a question about the salaries and benefits. You said that there's training in there. We already have a lot of money budgeted for training before this. So why would we not just maybe do training, like do some of this extra training through that and then reduce some of our other trainings that we might have planned, since this seems to be a more current thing we need to deal with? Why would we not just maybe cut out some of our other trainings that we were going to do and just put these in instead, so that we're not spending all this funds just on training? Like, I mean, because we're spending a bulk of the money on training and salaries and benefits. And I get we had to pay people over the summer. They've been working on these plans. I totally understand that. But I'm just trying to understand why we would spend money on training when we already have a lot of money for training.
So I think it's a balancing act, because you want to make sure that you're utilizing those CARES dollars where you can. And like Wendy mentioned, that we can monitor and adjust as we go into the year if we do need to pull back and maybe dip into more M&O. We did not have this volume set aside, or this large of a dollar amount set aside for training this summer by any means. I mean, it offset a little bit, but nowhere near to the level that we met with over 100 people coming in and then also our leaders. So it did dip in a little bit greater than what we thought.
So this $434,000 is just for the training prior to school starting, or that includes training throughout the year?
The training portion of that is about 150,000 of it.
Okay.
The other is for services such as transportation, if we do any after-school tutoring to fill gaps. Also, we know for our special needs program, we may owe what's called compensatory time. So services that we couldn't provide while we were closed, we may have to make that up. So there's funds set aside for that also.
Okay, so the 150 number is purely what was spent this summer. None of the $150,000 will be for training that happens after school begins.
No, so the 150,000 would be for the training once this new year starts. So at the beginning of the school year.
So where's the money for the summer training coming from?
So summer trainings, we have the instructional.
Well, we're saying training, but we mean the work on the committees and I mean all of that.
So
I'm
the
putting
committees
under
and things also would be included in this.
Right.
So the funds are coming for that committee work in here. And then on top of that, the 150 would be for 2 days of training for all our certified teachers.
After school began.
Or before school begins. A lot of these are things they need to know to plan for school opening. So it's
right. I'm just trying to figure out
protocols,
if it's,
parent view.
you know, this is outside of their contract hours, right? I mean, they already come back for training before school. So I'm just wondering if this is potentially on different days, the additional time, but really before school starts. This isn't training that's going to happen after the students arrive, well, whether it's online or in person, whatever, arrive, you know, on campus. Okay.
Right.
I
The
understand.
intent is for it to be before their contract days.
Okay.
And that, and again, this planning started back in June for this budget. So as things change, we'll be flexible and move that fund around.
Okay. Did you have any? Okay. I have another questions in terms of salaries and benefits. I know there's a lot of other money in there for services and other things. I didn't hear any mention in terms of like custodial staff or extra sort of facilities staff that might be required. Are we not planning on that right now? Or is there any sort of flexible funds that not knowing what it's going to look like? Do we foresee needing that or no?
So it does not include additional custodial staff. That is one of the things that we've discussed, that every employee will have the disinfectant available to them to be able to wipe down their own work area, their own classroom. And also that would be something that our classified staff could assist with.
Okay. What we wanted to do was, as one of the things that we made a commitment was that to keep our staff. And so if we, before adding to staff where that could have potentially been an opportunity for someone to keep their job or to keep working, we want to make sure that we've exhausted that first, and then would add if we needed, if we weren't able to do that. But we wanted to make sure that we always keep every opportunity for our current employees prior to adding to staff.
Absolutely. That makes sense to me. But what about, I mean, during the day, that makes sense, right? We need people to be flexible or to, you know, readdress their job description, which is going to, you know, require flexibility. But what about, right? I mean, after hours, right? I mean, and on different days, you know, in the hybrid scenario, I know we're going to talk about this later, but, you know, there may be other cleaning requirements in between that. Is that all going to be taken up by staff we already have, or even the overnight cleaning? I mean, you know, there's other times when our classified staff wouldn't be there that we don't foresee needing that additional staff, custodial staff.
Currently right now, our Dan Ensign feels like our current night custodial staff will be able to meet all of those needs. If at some point that he feels like we couldn't, then we would definitely look at it. He's filling, we have held on some positions currently, but his department is one that we are not holding on any positions, and they're filling if they have any openings.
Okay, sure. Sorry, I had one other question, not unrelated, and I've lost it. I'll think of it in a moment. Elaine, do you have any questions or comments?
Just the comment of losing money and losing more money, right? Clearly, that's something that I know that we had several emails about being able to spend money for extra staffing or wanting to meet the 6-foot guideline. But when you look at these numbers that Wendy just mentioned, if we're already losing the 5% from the online and the possibility of losing some of our current students to other online schools, that deficit just continues to keep growing, right? So, yeah, just show us the money, somebody. That's all.
Tanya, did you have any questions or comments for Wendy?
Not, I think everybody pretty much covered it. I think the only thing, and Wendy, again, you did touch on this. I just want to kind of reiterate on the PPE, you know, the grand scheme of things, I don't think for the people that need it, let's just make sure that we're spending the money on the people that have the potential to be a super infector and or a super spreader, and make sure we are really looking at what we're spending the money on, especially in those incidences. It's not going to be a huge amount of people, and I don't think it'll be a gigantic expense, but it is different than what we might do as a, you know, our kind of standard stuff. So
We are excited that she did not share is that we will have a COVID warehouse. So it's fun to say. I don't know why, but that's one fun thing that we definitely have been working on, so that we'll have it stocked so that schools can order as needed for any of the PPE that they need.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, I will. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I will. You know, echo what Tanya said. I think you know, $260,000 worth of, you know, protective equipment seems like an awful lot of protective equipment, right? But knowing how expensive it is and how hard it is to get, you know, that might not be the end of what we need, right? I mean, we don't know how many months or how long this is going to go on. And I know obviously that 260,000, while it seems like a lot of money, isn't going to last, you know, the entire year. Most likely that'll get us through, you know, a semester or something. So I would like for us to just continue to evaluate, you know, just kind of these budget points as you come and how much we're spending, where we are with that money, knowing that that $760,000 is not going to be all we're going to spend. I mean, we know that our opening costs and continuation costs are going to be higher, but I think it's important for us to continue to look at that and make sure that we can make adjustments. You know, I will say I'm not 100% comfortable with not sort of at least having some money there for additional cleaning staff. I understand the point about using the staff we have, because we're going to talk about that more. That's the highest priority right now, is to maintain all of our staff and maintain us being whole. And for the classified staff, that makes a whole lot of sense. I just worry about putting more pressure on teachers that are learning new models of learning or teaching and all of that kind of stuff, to also be worried that their space is not clean enough. So I'd like to at least be able to reevaluate that after, and I know we've got some committees that are looking at that. So I know teachers' voices will be heard, but this is just we don't know how this is going to go, and we don't know what classroom spaces will actually look like. So once they've been able to live in it and see how that works, I'd love to just be able to reassess that if we need to at a future time once we get back in the classroom.
One other thing I wanted to point out, since you're talking about finances here, is that, like she said, I think people need to be reminded that we're getting about $770,000 for this. And so when people ask us, why aren't you putting one kid per seat on a bus? That's because that costs $6.2 million and we only are getting $770,000. So we can't cover those costs. Or why we're not cutting our classes in half? Well, that's because that costs us $28 million. And again, we're only getting $770,000. And we have to make sure we have this PPE here, and we have to be able to do the online instruction, because as you pointed out, if we lose 10% of our kids, that's 2 million plus 6 million potentially. So just a reminder to everybody that when we're making these decisions, it's hard to make it, but it's ultimately we have to work within the financial strains that we have, and we have to make the best decisions we can with the money that we've got provided to us. And so we don't have an unlimited pot of money. Like Elaine keeps saying, people give us the money. I agree. Like if we could get it, but I just want to remind that to people that this is what we're working with. So when people are asking, this is why we're making the decisions we are.
Yeah. And I think that will go to probably our next point in terms of those different learning models and in styles that we're offering, you know, choice to our families so that no matter where they sort of fit in that puzzle, and as well as staff can, you know, offer some choice in a time where we feel like we've lost just about all control, you know, in our own personal lives as well as this. So hopefully that will give us a little bit of choice moving forward in what would be best for, you know, each individual student or staff member. So anyway, thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it.
All right, we're down to the last three. And the first one is Laura Combs with Professional Development for Distance Learning.
Just 1 second. All right, we put together kind of an overview of what it might look like for distance learning, and what our staff would really need to know to get them going. You know, when we left in March, teaching for our teachers looked very different and learning for our students looked very different. And we just didn't have the luxury of time to be able to train, really research all the best practices, provide our staff with the best tools to use. So this summer, and really since March, we've had an opportunity to kind of go ahead and really reflect, research, learn, curate, put things together so that we could provide that for our students and our staff as we move forward. So just in terms of we kind of put it into two categories, right? Just distance learning how-tos with the new technologies and the new curriculums and tools that they'll have access to, and then the curriculum piece of it as well. So just within the how-tos for all of our K-8 teachers is really the best practices for online teaching. And, you know, it looks like right now we may all be starting in that. We're not sure. But we do know that we're going to have some teachers that are for sure in that with our Distance Learning Academy. And whether we have to go to a hybrid or full virtual, all staff are going to need to have these skills of what's best practices for our students for online teaching and learning. So that includes lesson design, delivery, how do we just take attendance, a good schedule that's consistent across our district, how do we embed our conscious discipline, and then grading, assessment, and feedback. We purchased Nearpod for all of our staff. Hopefully, anybody that's watching, check your email. You should have gotten your login today. Please don't do anything with it because we don't want you working right now. We want you enjoying your time off. But we do need to be able to provide them with training for that. So that's actually going to start tomorrow with some of our teachers doing an introduction to Nearpod. And Nearpod is a way to design content and deliver it in an engaging way. In fact, I was just working on something where you include some checking for understanding by having students match pairs, polls and collaborative boards and drawing on things. So it's a way to really deliver content virtually and in the classroom creatively and engaging. We needed a platform where we could house everything, our learning management system. So that's Google Classroom and Google Apps that we'll be using with all K-8 teachers. And then just those tools to facilitate this. Google Meets, you know, our video conferencing, and then being able to record our lessons. So all of that takes training. Just in that training alone, we're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of PD just in that. And that's just the how-tos, right? That's not the curriculum piece of it. Within curriculum, we're rolling out Wonders from, we've had it for K2, we need it for 3-5, but we need that digital component as well. Mystery Science for K5, refreshing our staff on the use of MobiMax, which we purchased for the whole district. For our distance learning teachers, we'll be using a component of our math curriculum, Eureka, Engage New York, called In Sync with that. It's still our curriculum, but they've designed it for online, so some of our teachers will need that. Newsella for 3-8, No Red Ink for 6-8. We also have special education and ELL that will need staff training. So each of those is between 45 to an hour. So we designed kind of a proposed schedule, and that doesn't even include any of the operational teams that we've heard, with critical standards, student and staff safety. So we did design kind of a proposed schedule without even, being able to have site-based things. We're looking at, 3 days just for that 3.5 days for that. And that doesn't include anything from our site-based. So with that, I can answer any questions about our proposed professional development and training for staff.
So just so that I understand, so these 3 days are necessary basically just to get us started in this new learning environment, right? Teaching, getting our sort of best practices in place, the Nearpod, and all of the things that go with that. It excludes, as you said, any site-based training, so their campus and that kind of thing. Obviously, we will still have that. We got to work out how all that fits. So these are 3 additional days to what is already on the calendar. Is that correct?
Well, we have 3 days built in as pre-service days. It would take all 3 of them, basically.
Right, but I think we all agree that we need the teachers and staff still need what you would typically give them on those original 3 days. I mean, we could take over the 3 days, but I mean, there really needs to be some additional time to cover that, whether we cover some of that in the original 3 days, but we still would need some additional time is what I'm hearing for staff, whether that be before or after those original pre-service days for those additional things, sounds like to me.
So what we'll be working on next is tomorrow we're meeting to outline what training do we need for our leaders, and then to work with our leaders on what does, after tonight's decisions, what does the beginning of the year look like? So even though some of this, like maybe our committees are a little ahead of what we are at, but we have to have the decisions first to kind of make even more concrete plans, and then we'll iron it all out in very specific detail.
Makes sense. There's a lot of moving parts in this scenario right now, unfortunately. I mean, I do think it is very important because, outside of just the health and safety precautions we need to take with getting teachers back into their actual classrooms and on campus, I think just the comfortability of knowing what, I think it's without a doubt, there will be some distance learning component to this year, whether we start in that format or we are forced there because of a closure, or we find ourselves there because of a different reason. That will be part of our year. And I think parents should definitely be prepared for that, whatever that might look like. So I do think it's important that we don't cut short what that, sort of training will look like. And I think, as Melissa mentioned earlier, I mean, I think training is essential, but I think our focus needs to be on what teachers and staff need to get them started in this new environment. If that means we have to forego other training throughout the year that we've planned, because for anyone who's ever seen our professional development calendar, it's amazing. I mean, if there's anything you want to do or learn or grow or whatever, it's out there for you. So we've talked about that for years about, we're light years ahead of other districts in that respect. But I will put it out there that this year might just look different in the sense that, we may need to reevaluate some of the other trainings and put them on hold, which is disappointing because we've come really far with some of the other trainings. But I think, Laura, as you mentioned, I mean, this has to take precedence because we're doing it right now. We're living in the moment, and we have to get this information into our teachers' hands to make them feel more comfortable coming back to the classroom, wherever that may be. Elaine, any other questions or comments for Laura?
Yeah, just a really quick question. With the pretty obvious fact that we will be starting online, is this the committee where we're talking about requirements or standards for digital lessons or whatnot that all teachers will be held accountable to? Is in this section, in this committee? Okay. Obviously we'll decide what those are going to be. I just wanted to make sure that it was inside of a committee. Okay.
Well, and I think, we're going off of the assumption that if we are in digital learning, it is a full day of learning. I think the governor's requirement is even the 5 days. So that's kind of the assumption that we're going off of, unless, of course, something changes, which tomorrow it might. But I also wanted to add, I think, on top of just making sure that our teachers have what they need, which is so important. I mean, they did some amazing work from March to May with so very little time and so very little resources. And we tried to give them some direction, but I mean, the things that they did were just amazing. But we also want to make sure that we give our kids all of the equity that they deserve. So making sure that each teacher has what they need, so then each student has what they need. I think that that's critical at this point. Not just, distance learning, but face-to-face, that's what we want all the time. And we want to make sure that we create that by the things that we're asking them to use, the curriculum we're asking them to use, and the things we're asking them to do with it. So that's our goal for our committee.
Great, thank you very much. Anyone else?
I wanted to know, so these online kind of platforms that we're using, is this something that we're kind of going to expect even teachers that are teaching in a classroom 5-day to still be incorporating into their daily things? So that, for instance, if we do have a reason where all of a sudden this class or this school gets pushed into a distance learning situation, everybody's already familiar with it and kind of using it already?
So the things that we're offering are absolutely things that we want all of our staff to be using within the classroom as well, face to face, because they're great tools and they're great pieces that will add to their curriculum. So yeah, the reason we purchased these things or moved in this direction is to make sure that we could have that continual learning, whether it was in face-to-face or hybrid or distance learning, so that we could make sure they could use all of it any of the times, and to give them the tools that they really need.
Okay, and then to piggyback on what Elaine was saying, as far as this is the committee that will say these are what our expectations are for distance learning, they will not be the same, right, as we had when we did this in March through May, which I agree our teachers did some fantastic things, but we definitely saw where some were less comfortable with that, with that platform of teaching versus others. Having 2 kids and multiple teachers over that, you could see that even within that, the some that were more comfortable versus others. Not that they didn't work amazing and do amazing things, but we're going to have set expectations that are higher than that, correct, going forward?
We're going off of the AOI application that we submitted. So if we're in distance learning, all of us, then we're kind of going off the same model that we would be using for the Distance Learning Academy. So, you know, within that, we've submitted a schedule, we've submitted the curriculum, we've submitted the assessment pieces of it. So those are the things that we're going off of for distance learning for all as well. Is that clear?
Yes. Great, thank you. Sorry, we're having some weird feedback over here. Okay, thank you, Laura, very much. Very important work. We know that's, unfortunately, this one's going to be ever changing because you never know how many kids we're going to have in distance learning at any point in time, but thank you very much for that. John, who's up next?
We have Jennifer Benjamin with the Conscious Discipline COVID plan, and I do believe she's out of town, so she's on location. So she sent us a video that we're going to look at. Stevie, do we have that video?
Unfortunately, I couldn't do this virtually or live, so I figured this was the next best thing. At the end of the presentation, if you have any questions, maybe like be glad to answer any of them. Like how I volunteered. A committee of people, principals, directors, teachers got together and we're trying to figure out what are the next steps for our teachers, our students, and our school family with the COVID closures and how do we need to come back? What do we need to make sure we're doing? We know conscious discipline is so very important for all of our family members. And so one of the things that we talked about is that each school is still going to have their conscious discipline rollout plan. This is what they were planning for this year. This is what their CDAT team decided was needed on each of their campuses. But the committee got together and we said it was really, really important for all of us to focus on a couple of really big things above and beyond what the school team is doing. Because we know that we're not quite sure what people are going to be coming back to, what they've experienced while they've been gone, how they're feeling emotionally with everything going on, if they have family members who've been sick. So we met and we talked about multiple options and opportunities. And what we ended up doing is narrowing it down to two very focused things that are above and beyond what the plans are on campuses so that we can make sure that our students' needs are being met, our teachers and staff needs are being met, and that we're really supporting families in the process as well. The two areas that we're going to focus on that are kind of the COVID plus is safety and connection. So we know that coming back, there's a safety issue that people aren't necessarily going to feel safe right away. And we have to build that safety and we have to build that piece of it for them. So we have 4 lesson plans built for that. And principals will be able to go through and select 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those plans that they feel that their campus needs, specifically on safety. Whether that is composure, what does it look like to feel like to be safe, visual routines, or self-regulation. We also have the connection piece. We know that our teachers have been out for almost 6 months, our students have been out for 6 months, our families haven't been a part of it for 6 months, and we have really done our best to be able
social stories, greetings and goodbyes. What does that look like now that we can't touch, high five, hug, which is something that all of the teachers typically do? So we have lesson plans on what those greetings could look like. They could be magic sparkle fingers. They could be toe taps. Lots of different things to build that connection with hellos and goodbyes, even if we're not able to touch in a playful way. We talked about the Brain Smart Start every single morning, building those connections. How would that look virtually? What does that look like in the classroom? We Care Center, which is if somebody is absent, giving them a wish well, writing a little card, letting them know that they're being thought about. So We Care Center is really important in the classroom to help build empathy and compassion. That absent student ritual, when a student is gone and they're welcomed back into the classroom, what does that look like so that they know that they were missed? It could be school family jobs. We know that some of these are going to have to change and look a little bit different because of COVID. So having some lessons and some professional development around that for our teachers also. And the Friends and Family Board. A lot of our students have been at home for a long time. And so leaving their family is going to be traumatic. Leaving their mom or leaving their dad or their caretaker and coming back to school might be very difficult. Or they have somebody they love that's at home, maybe not feeling very well. So that Friends and Family Board is going to be super important also. I just wanted to give you a brief update of what our committee is doing based on conscious discipline and how we're supporting principals, schools, teachers, students, and families. If you do have any questions, please ask Megan Duplain. She'd be happy to answer them. Have a great meeting, and I miss you all, and I'll see you in a week.
Okay, only Jennifer Benjamin would remember to pre-pack her Palm Valley Thunderbirds t-shirt so that she could wear that in a presentation from Montana. So I'm sure you'll be watching this as, you know, entertainment on your trip. So kudos to you, Jennifer, for remembering to pack that t-shirt. Thank you very much. I will, Megan, I'm not gonna put you on the spot. I think, you know, of all the questions and comments we've had all night long, this is one area that I am absolutely not worried about. Conscious discipline, and, you know, outside of the training or retraining potentially of some of our staff, I think Litchfield goes above and beyond, and we know what we need to do. Everyone has been really well trained in this area, and I think her two, you know, specialized focused areas keep it really simple, keep it really easy for us to transition kids back to, you know, an in-person learning environment. So very well done. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Nope. Okay. All right, John, I think this leaves us at our last one. Is that correct?
It does. This is the last committee update. Thanks everyone for hanging in there. Dr. Ron Stair with the extended day camp update.
All right, thank you, John, and President Clymer, members of the board. I appreciate you giving me a little bit of time. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good. All right. Thank you. I'll try to be brief. You know, I was a little bit worried about my own kids. They were sitting around talking about how much they miss school. And I asked, you know, who are you and what have you done with my children? And that is a lesson that we're getting from camp, is that the kids are ready. The kids are ready to return. They're really enjoying being around one another. We find that just being together is a motivator for them. You know, case in point is I was sitting this morning on the floor playing blocks with a kindergartner and a preschooler. And the preschooler said to the kindergartner, "You're getting pretty close to me. Why don't you put on your mask?" And reminded him to put his mask on. And I was impressed with that. And it took some time to get them there, but they do get there. But it's a motivator for them to be together. And many parents have expressed how grateful they are to have the option of camp. And the kids are having fun. And the kids have remained healthy and safe. And so a lot of celebrations there. Shelley mentioned the hot group earlier that has provided all those masks. And I will tell you, the masks are a big deal. I took some of those by both sites today. And I think that, you know, picking masks will soon replace shoe shopping as the thing of choice for them to do, because they descended on those masks and they just loved them. And they were beautiful masks that they made. And the kids are coming with lots of cute masks too. And we're finding that the fact that they love their mask doesn't mean that they wash it. Those masks get pretty hot and sweaty and gross by the end of the day, and particularly by the end of last week, we learned that we needed to start recommending to some parents that they either provide more than one mask, or they be prepared to wash them every day. There are some disgusting masks there after a while, but these are things that we're learning as camp goes on. A few other things that we've learned is, first of all, how adaptable the kids are and how flexible the adults need to be. Everyone's wearing a lot of hats, and our traditional roles, our traditional division of labor isn't working, or it hasn't worked. We found that everybody has to do pretty much everything, and everybody has to be willing to step outside of their normal roles, and because it's a different situation, and we're learning as we go. You know, one thing that I think we become more, I think, cognizant of every day is just how nervous parents really are. And we've learned we have to really address that. We have to be upfront with that. You know, there are several schools of thought out there among parents. Some are saying, you know, they're going to get it eventually. But we're finding that a lot are very, very nervous, and understandably so. It's a dangerous disease. And so, and staff members as well. And so we have to directly address those anxieties. We can't just say, well, it'll get better, or people will get used to it. But we're finding we have to actually talk about those things. It does help a lot to discuss what's happening in other districts and what's happening around the state. Part of a group of community ed directors. There's about 15 of us that meet pretty regularly. We met just the other day, and one thing that was very, very enlightening to me was so far none has had a case of COVID among the kids at their camp. And that doesn't mean that no kids are getting it, but we are all screening, doing health screenings, and so no kids at camp so far have tested positive for COVID. Around the state, several workers have. We feel fortunate we haven't had one test positive yet. But that's another thing we're learning, is that employees still get sick. We've had, you know, there's a head cold going around, and of course, you know, it scares us when someone is coughing or congested and they go to the doctor and it turns out to be a cold. Or, you know, someone may get food poisoning, or they ate something, or that kind of, people still get sick. And we treat it very, very seriously, and we get them out of the environment right away, and we make sure that they're getting medical help right away. But so far, again, we feel very fortunate that no one has contracted COVID-19, or at least tested positive of it. And so, but we're taking a lot of precautions, and we're finding we have to be very, very vigilant and diligent and careful about that. But again, flexibility is the key. You know, the staffing issue has been really, really challenging, because, you know, we're running with minimal staffing, which means we've been shorthanded a lot. And fortunately, we've had reserve staff who were willing to work in the summer, but weren't initially chosen to work for camp. And they've been able to step in here and there. But it is really, really difficult to schedule and to maintain the staff and to make sure that we're being as safe as possible. Because whereas before, someone might make it through the day with a sniffle and nobody would even notice, now a sniffle is something we notice, and a sniffle is something we pay a lot of attention to, or a cough, or those kind of things. And so, you know, the level of vigilance has risen, but so has the concern over maintaining enough staff just to do the job. Trends in enrollment. Initially, enrollment for the 5-week camp, I think, mirrored general optimism that the virus would subside or abate over the summer as the summer progressed. And at the beginning of the summer, in our first week of camp, enrollment numbers were, for the 5 weeks, increased for every week. And so at the beginning of the summer, it looked like we were going to need to add staff and several, at least 4 groups per site. And as the summer has progressed, those numbers have dwindled, and it's actually been very, very consistent. We had fairly low numbers that first week, and then each week, every time there's a new news report about how the numbers are climbing, a few parents will call and say, I don't think my kid's coming next week. Or after Governor Ducey's announcement that he was delaying school, we had a few withdrawals that day. And so we're finding that general nervousness, that general anxiety affects enrollment. It affects whether or not people want their kids to be there, and certainly understandably so. And we try to be as empathetic as possible with them, and let them know that we don't blame them at all for wanting their child to be safe, but that we're doing everything we can at camp to be safe, and that the kids have been safe. They've been doing really, really great. as we look towards this coming fall, we're looking at all the options that everyone has talked about today for our before and after school programs. Right now, enrollment for the fall is very low. It's about a third of where it was at this time last summer. But we're also getting a lot of feedback from parents that they're just kind of waiting to see what happens with the school day. So for instance, if a child were on a hybrid model and only going to school two days a week, then they wouldn't need as much extended days. So a lot of parents are just kind of waiting to see how things pan out, both in our district, but with their older kids and things like that. There's each family has their own situation. And so I know that's a lot to consider, but we're learning a lot as camp goes on. And honestly, I'm grateful for the opportunity. It's been really, really neat to see people develop some new leadership qualities that we didn't know that they had, and people show flexibility. And it's been honestly just really great to be around kids again. And I think that's probably the biggest message I have, is that the kids are coming back, and everything will seem so much better once we're through this drudgery and we get to actually working with kids again. That's about all I had.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Sayre. I know it's difficult to do your job and only be able to do it halfway at times, because we're just not able to do exactly what we want to do, and sort of asking a lot of the staff to be flexible and things like that. But it sounds like that's going well and they're adapting. I'll open up the floor to any questions or comments, concerns here.
No questions. Great. Ron, like I said before, the information that you've been providing has been, instrumental for a bird's eye view of how kids are handling it. And you're the one who's seeing them more than anybody. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think it's great that we were able to do our camp this summer for like the people that really needed it are probably the ones that are staying no matter what, with all these crazy things that keep coming out every day. We've got some people that really just need this and we're able to provide it for them. I think it's also good for us to see, like, in a small confined environment, of how this is going to work and how kids are like handling masks and how they're handling the social distancing. It makes me have another question I'll ask later about maintaining enough staff, because I think that's going to be something we're going to be having to look at in a bigger scale, that this is showing us here. Like even here, they have the reserve staff to pull on. And I want to make sure that we are figuring out what we're going to do on a larger scale when our kids go back to school. But I do appreciate the work you're doing. And I think all our teachers are jealous you're still getting to play with kids this summer and just do fun stuff and be with the kids and not just have to worry about all the bad stuff all the time.
I was going to say, it's, your opening line was, I was playing with a preschooler in a kindergarten today. And I think everybody's heart here just like swelled up a little bit, like, okay, this is, what we're supposed to be doing right now. So I'm glad there is some sense of normalcy during their day at camp and things like that, which is great. So yeah, I think I share the same concerns in terms of, we want to make sure that we can offer these services to our families that are in need through the school year. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging, whether we can do it at every campus and in the way we've done it before and still maintain all the proper protocols. I think a lot of those things are up in the air. And until we know when we're starting school and what that looks like and what environment they're going to be in, I know a lot of those questions are unanswered, but I'm confident we'll be able to address them once we have more understanding of where we're going and what we're doing. But I do think it's important, as Melissa pointed out, that this is a service where, we may be down in numbers overall, but those numbers of people that, really need safe and, reliable childcare after school or, during any breaks we might have. I think it's important that we work as hard as we possibly can to make sure that we can, maintain that for them.
I agree. Thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. Okay. All right, John, I think we are done. Is that all of our community committee presentations?
That completes them.
I'm sorry, I had you on mute. Say that one more time.
It's complete. Yes.
I apologize. We're dealing with some feedback here. So I didn't, you were quicker than me on the button. So anyway.
No problem.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, so anything else that you'd like to address, Jody, in that line item? No. Okay. Moving on to 15A, we do not have any items to address from our consent agenda, so we will move on. The expenditure budget 2021 adoption. This is what we reviewed earlier in the evening with questions and discussion. So I will certainly open it up for any questions if we had any remaining from earlier in the evening.
I have nothing more.
Tanya, do you have anything to add?
Nope. I feel like we've covered it. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Then I will entertain a motion to approve the expenditure budget for 2021 school year.
I motion to approve the expenditure budget 2020-2021 adoption as presented. I guess. Yeah.
I second.
Okay. Let's see. Can you do the volume for me, please? Just, I'm going to ask everybody to go through individually just because now we're getting into our action items. So board members, I'll just ask you individually just to say yes or no so everyone can hear on these next couple of items. Melissa, what is your vote?
Melissa's item, I guess.
Elaine?
Elaine Weathersby, yay.
Tanya?
Tanya Fitzer, yay.
Danielle Clymer, I'm also yay. So everyone is in affirmative, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 15C, possible adoption of learning models for the 2021 school year. We'll have Superintendent Gunning walk us through that.
Madam President, members of the governing board, want to present to you our 3 learning options for the next school year. A couple of things that I did want to share as we jump into this is that these are the options that we're considering once we are able to return to school safely. So I think that was kind of confusing for some folks too, but right now we are all starting in a distance learning model, which is that kind of scenario 3, if you're looking back at your roadmap from ADE, as right now it is not safe to return to our buildings. And then we'll have to keep monitoring to see what does it look like in the future and when we're able to return safely, and even what guidance we receive from the governor. So I wanted to kind of put that out there too. As you can see, I kind of just did little small brief updates from these. So kind of from our last presentation. So we have our in-person learning model. This falls under scenario 1 if you're looking at the ADE roadmap. That's grades K through 8, 5 days a week. Students remain with their cohort, which you've heard a lot of information on. This also provides that safe place for students per the Arizona governor executive order for the 5 days in a week. We have our hybrid learning model. That's scenario 2 out of the roadmap, kind of all of those different pieces. And it has that blended learning model where it's in person and online. And we are still going through all of the staffing and all of those pieces. So this may not be available at every campus, but we're definitely going to try. And then of course we have our LESD Digital Learning Academy / distance learning that's that all the time, which is kind of like that scenario 3 in the ADE roadmap, grades K through 8, 5 days a week, online learning. Now, if you look under in-person and hybrid, I also added scenario 4 to that, just so that people understood that was that scenario 4 from the roadmap where we have to come and go in distance learning, which is a high probability throughout the year, just based on our different situations. After consulting with legal and also looking at our staffing, our initial overall, we're still like probably knee deep in staffing and looking at numbers and all of that. We feel pretty confident that we can offer all 3 models. Again, with that caveat that we're still trying to review if we're able to offer the hybrid at every campus, but we know that we would be able to offer it throughout the district, and so that we would have opportunities for those families who really would like that option for them. So that was something we wanted to make sure. We wanted to definitely thank all of our staff and all of our families for their flexibility, their kind words, kind emails, as they know that we're trying to meet the needs of as many people as possible. We know we won't meet everybody's needs, and we know we won't make everyone happy. But as you heard tonight, we're just really stuck in a rock and a hard spot in a lot of different situations. And we don't want to run the risk of losing our families when we have 43% that want in person, 33% that want hybrid, and 24% that want online. Those are large chunks of children that we would really like to try to meet their needs, as well as our staff. We had staff that we had a lot of staff that were willing to do whatever we asked them to do. And we had a lot of staff that based on their needs really wanted that opportunity for online or for hybrid. So tonight, I present these options to you for approval to go into the 2020-21 school year.
Thank you, Jody. Appreciate it. Questions, comments, discussion from the board?
Okay. So we have gotten emails requesting all of these. We have gotten emails requesting one of these, emails requesting two of these. And if there's one thing that I think that I've really kind of grasped during this meeting today is that we want to provide choices. We want to provide choices for our students. We want to provide choices for our staff, which means if you are a staff member that definitely is much more comfortable wanting to do online, please reach out and make sure that your principal knows that or that Jody knows that so that we can accommodate to give everybody the best choices. It's really the only thing that was clear in my mind today is that offering these choices, because we don't want you to leave. We can't afford for you to leave. We need you to stay. We love you. We want everybody in our family to stick together. And without these choices, I think that it could possibly result in the loss of some of you. And we definitely don't want that.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a great point. I mean, aside from the difficult choice that's in front of families, I mean, just because you have three options doesn't mean that they're three great options that meet all of your needs. And we realize that, right? We know that nothing on this screen right now is perfect. But I do appreciate that our district is trying to work with the feedback that we were given in that people want options and they want choices. So I have a couple of questions, but Melissa, Tanya, I'll let you guys go first if you guys have anything.
First, a question about hybrid, just because it was brought up to me and I want to make sure we make it clear to everybody. In all these models, we're offering them K through 8. Like right now, we want that's what's being presented to be voted on, is to offer all these options for K through 8. So that includes middle school for hybrid. It includes online for everybody can have any of these options if we approve them. Yes, okay. So then the next thing is we did get a lot of emails from one particular campus, but we did get a lot of emails about the hybrid thing. And so I think it's important to point out with what Wendy said about if we lose 10% of our students, that's $2 million plus a potential another $6 million of why we're looking at all these options for people, because of the fact that we don't want to lose our students. And at the end of the day, we can only do what we can afford to do for our families. And if we lost $2 million plus a potential $6 million, that would be devastating to our district. And so I think it's important that people know that we're not making these decisions lightly, that we are really trying to take into account everything about what's best for kids. And the other thing is that right now the governor's decided it's not safe until potentially August 17th, but maybe later. But when he says schools have to open, that's not necessary. Like, that's not our decision to open at that point, because he's put this executive order out that we have to have a 5-day option. So to everybody that's like, why are you not just doing online? We have to be concerned about our funding and keeping the money that we need in order to pay for our teachers and our staff to educate our students. So I think it's really important that we don't forget that that matters and that we are doing everything we can to be safe for our students, but we're not being asked whether or not it is safe for our schools to open. We're being asked to decide what is the safest way to do what we have to do. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that when we're making these decisions, it's not about, is this safe? It is about what can we do with the restraints we have on us from the governor, from our funding, from the state. We have to take all that into consideration when making our decisions. So I just wanted to make sure that we point that out. I think it's super important because all the feedback we've gotten from everybody is really important and we value it and we care very much. We want our teachers to be safe. And I would hate to think that there's people that are worried that they're going to come back and not be safe. And I would also hate to think that there are families that might move their kids because they don't know if they'll be safe if we don't offer choices for them. My one question, I don't know if it fits here or not, is about maintaining adequate staffing. Like what we did see with our extended day thing is that they're having to pull in some reserve staff. We don't have that as a district. So what do we do when we have a teacher sick and we have a class that needs a sub? And if we, like, what, are we concerned about subs? And if we don't have a sub, we can't split the kids out. So what is our plan for that?
So what we're doing right now is working really closely with ESI, which is our sub provider. And kind of, they're in the same boat that we are with so many unknowns, but we're working hand in hand and we'll partner together. I'm honestly becoming comfortable knowing that there's going to be some mountains that we have to climb and it's just when the mountain's there that we climb it. But definitely making sure we have those connections. They're working as hard as they can and partnering, doing lots and lots of training with their staff as well, so that they're prepared. Doing the best that we can in those areas. And I appreciate, all of you being so flexible, because there just is so much that we just don't know. Even our legal counsel is like, this is my best guess at this moment. Guidance is still coming out. We still haven't received a lot of the guidance that we were looking for. That's in detail. Supposedly a lot will come out by the end of the week, and there's going to be training next week. But as you know, the clock is ticking, and so it's becoming crunch time, and it is tough. It's definitely time sensitive and tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'm sorry, did you have anything else, Melissa? Okay. I think one thing, kind of to your point, just to sort of set the stage, right? So people understand how we're coming at these decisions. It's important to remember also that, not all of these scenarios are going to fit for every person. So whether that's staff or family, we hope you will find one that will fit. But not all of them are going to be for you, and that's okay. So I have a few specific questions. We might not know all the answers, but this is some of the feedback I've been getting. And as a parent myself, I think these were good questions. So in terms of the hybrid especially, but also the distance learning academy, because there may be some crossover there since part of the hybrid will be kind of in a distance learning situation. What is a day in the life of a hybrid student? So I understand the 2 days that they're on campus, they will be in a traditional classroom, and it will be very similar as best we can to what a normal day would look like. They would have, experience with, potentially specialist teachers, or their, 4 or 5 subject area teachers. And, they will be for 6 or 7 hours, sort of consistently taught. On the 3 days, well, let's say on the 2 days that the other half of their cohort is being taught in person. What is the mix of learning that they're going to experience online? Is it going to be, I know we talked about synchronous and asynchronous, like what do you think? I know we don't know everything, but what do you think that's going to look like? What is going to be the requirement for students to be learning with their teacher, sort of watching maybe what's happening in a classroom or something like that, versus more flexible, you finish this based on a timeline that's suitable for you, and more of the work at your own pace.
I know we're at the very beginning stages of this, but I know Gina probably had a little more info. I'll have her jump in.
Okay, I'm here. Sorry. My son just came home and surprised me about 10 minutes ago that he's in town. Okay, we are looking at a schedule for distance learning and for hybrid learning that is pretty set every day so that the kids have some structure and routine. So when you're asking about what the hybrid would look like, so let's just use our A group, for example, an A group of kids that's in school on Monday and Thursday, and then they're home on Tuesday and Friday, and Wednesday is also their home day, but all 3 of those days would be online learning. So they would have a morning hour where they may all get on and do the synchronous learning as a class meeting with the kids that are in school, the B group, and the A kids that are at home. And then they would go ahead and go into an online lesson that maybe is not with the teacher, that's asynchronous, either in English or in math or language arts. And then they would have a brain break, and then they would either have foundations or writing, and then either social studies or science, and then a virtual special. And then the teacher would have some virtual office hours in there for those kids when they're at home. And then they would have like both the A and B kids would have what we would call a C day, which would be that one day at home where they're all doing the same thing. So it might be a virtual office with the teachers, it may be small group instruction, a class meeting, brain break, community class building, individual support. Those are the kinds of things that we're looking at right now, and opportunities to extend and explore shared reading or independent reading, or choose their own practices from choice boards and things like that. So we're mocking up some schedules, thank you to Laura Combs, of different ways that we can look at that and then share that with her committee so they can fine tune it. Did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. I was just looking, I'm thinking trying to think from a parent perspective, right? If I'm wanting to choose hybrid because I want maybe potentially a smaller class size and I want less days on campus, but still looking at that model, how are we, am I expecting, it sounds like I'm expecting maybe 1 and maybe up to 3 hours a day where my child is sort of engaging with their teacher, classroom, whatever that might look like in different subjects, specials, class meetings, all of that kind of stuff. And then, the other time would be sort of self-directed and that kind of thing. So I think that's just, I just want to understand what that blended model looks like for that. So that's a great idea. I'm assuming the Distance Learning Academy would be very similar, right? Structured, structured day and things like that. So I would assume that would be the same for them.
It would be more structured, more so probably than the distance learning, because that's all they have is the online academy. So they don't have that split between having classwork and then having online, but yeah, very similar.
Okay. So that's the student piece. Now the teacher piece, as Melissa alluded to, we've had feedback from families and teachers and everything. So if I'm a teacher in person, granted things are going to be different this year, but typically, they would have a as normal as possible schedule, including, different breaks and things like that. If I am teaching hybrid or online from a staff perspective, what is my experience with my peers? So how are they doing PLCs? Are they having breaks? Are they having planning time with their grade level? I know we've talked, you guys have been so good about drilling it into our head, like how important it is to share data and have that planning time and all of that. So do these other two models allow staff to continue to do that? It might not be with the in-person staff, it may be with the hybrid or the distance learning staff, and that's okay. But does it still allow for those things so the staff can have the same experience and feel like they can provide the same learning or teaching to the kids as they would if they were in person 5 days a week?
Absolutely. And we envision the hybrid teachers where we have the hybrid on the campuses to be working with either with the 5 days or with other hybrid teachers across the district, or maybe a little bit of both, because they're having that different experience. It's kind of like, if you think about what we've done with traditional academy over the years, they work with their grade level team, but then they also work with teachers across the district that are having that same experience that they're having. So it would be a little bit of both. And then as far as the digital learning academy goes, we're still figuring out placement. It would be nice if they all had a time to be together to collaborate on what their online lessons are like and what that structure is looking like and all that, but also good for them to be a part of a school campus too. So it's that, again, depends on numbers. And so when we get to that point with the fine tuning with the online academy, but professional learning communities are the heart of all of our campuses. And we want teachers to continue to be involved in that. And we have figured out how we're going to assess students. So we know that that will be happening along the way at some point in time, not right away with distance learning, but once we do those assessments and then we're looking at kids and you're figuring out how to do interventions. Jen Larson, our EL coordinator today, was talking about the ideas that she has for intervening with our EL kids. And everybody has really great ideas. I think it's going to be really useful in getting all the kids what they need.
Thank you very much. I think that's a crucial piece to this, just to make sure that we're, I know you guys behind the scenes are thinking about staff interactions and how that planning works and making sure, I just want to make sure that, parents too understand that they're going to get the same education in a hybrid model. It's just going to be delivered in a different way. It's going to be hard for us to just jump into all of these models right away, but I'm confident we're going to do it successfully and in a professional manner, and just know that our teachers going to have access to the same resources and each other that they would no matter what model they're in, and have, you know, breaks throughout the day and all the things they would have in a typical year, if possible. So thank you for explaining that. I really appreciate it. And one last question, and then I will open it up for any other discussion. We had talked earlier last week, it feels like last year, about movement between these. So I know there are so many questions, right? At what time period might we do that if there's space available? If you are moving from a hybrid and you have to go to a different campus and you go to another campus, I mean, there's a million scenarios we could go through. We don't have time for that, but just quickly run through, if you commit, I'll use that word, right? Because we're going to have to ask for that in a couple of weeks. Parents are going to have to commit to that, and teachers too. Once you make that commitment, what are the opportunities between in-person, hybrid, and distance learning academy? What do we think would be the opportunity to switch if parents feel they need to make that switch?
So we're looking at intervals, looking at around quarter intervals, because we also have to have time to prepare and to plan. Just the same, you know, you want to be prepared, especially in this time, so that that child can be successful in whichever model or mode that they're moving into. Of course, we are asking our teachers to be flexible too, and that when they're committing to something that they're kind of committing, but still having that flexibility that what if we do receive a vaccine and that does come about, hopefully by January or sometime, that then if we have most people wanting to come back to a typical model, that there's flexibility there too. Meaning that like if families all want to come back and everybody's like, I just want to go back to school in a typical way, that we have flexibility. So flexibility is definitely going to be key. And this year is definitely going to be unique as we kind of go through and travel through this unknown time as we kind of venture in. But I'm very appreciative. I was so impressed with the staff surveys. I was impressed with how fast they came back. I was impressed with how flexible they were. And how they know that there are a lot of staff members that have very specific needs. And so they're willing to support them in that model. And the families, I mean, just lots of families. And I think that was what was so powerful tonight, to have the committees to show, because it's one thing to say we're working on all these things, but it's another thing to hear the work that's behind the scenes on all of the different components and pieces so that we can be as successful as possible.
Absolutely. That's great. I think, you know, we're asking a lot of flexibility from people, staff and families and everybody down the road. And I think us trying to show some flexibility and allowing people to change as their comfortability level might change is good. You know, I will say that obviously with a caveat that, you know, students and staff have to be safe, and creating environments that they're safe may mean that someone has to wait a little longer than they might want to, or a model might not be available right at the moment they want it. But I think if we can just be patient and flexible, then, you know, we'll work it out as we move through that quarter. So fantastic. Thank you very much. Anything else?
I do. I have just two questions on the online digital academy. I know some teachers are feeling that if they make a commitment to the online, that they feel that their position may not be available back on the same campus. Possibility, correct? Would you say, Jody?
Correct. I mean,
Correct.
it's just hard to say either
Right.
way. I mean, of course, we would always want people to be able to go back to their
They're
campus.
homeschooled, right? And I think that's mainly the one point that I
yeah.
wanted to touch on,
Right.
because I was asked those questions, or that was raised awareness to me, is that because of the need to be flexible, and knowing that if you sign up for online, the absolute 100% best scenario is we all go back to school and you go back to your home school.
And there may be some that want to stay online.
And there may be some that do, or maybe some that want to pick a different campus.
What
But
we-
I think maybe just for the teachers to know that, I think that the district is committed to, from what I've understood from Jody, to getting you back to your home campus, if that's where you want to go, if that can work.
Right.
By
It's
all means,
hard.
that would be the
Right.
best scenario. So
Right.
for those of you who are concerned about that, unfortunately, it is a concern, a valid concern. But go forward knowing that the direction will be to put you back where you belong and where you want to be. I think it's easy.
And I think that's the hardest part is I know that's hard because in the moment you're looking at what you need in that time. And I don't know what the future holds. And when we talk about enrollment, those types of things, that's the stuff I worry about in ongoing. So I'm always cautious of where I can't guarantee completely. Of course, what I want to, and is that not the desire? Is anyone who would want to go back to their home campus could go back? Sure. But we would, always with that little caveat of.
It's hard to say,
Right.
flexibility. I had one other teacher question, and I only mentioned this as staff because it was a question that I wasn't really sure where it was going to fall in as well. When it comes to performance pay, attendance pay, I know these are things that we have talked about and, at nauseam and people are still worried about. Is there a committee that is specifically handling that type of thought process?
So let me clarify that one more time. And I know a lot of you, some of you have watched some of the meetings and some of you haven't had the opportunity. So hopefully everyone is here. And if you haven't, please tell every single person that you know. Our career development committee is working on this process. This is something that we had set forth and it was a goal from last year, ending the year. So our committee will be working on that. They're going to look through what those options look like for like attendance, for example, because that's a tough one right now. It doesn't even really fit. With everything that we're in. So for example, then they'll put forth what their recommendations are for something like that. And let's just give an example, like maybe it's not attendance, maybe it's professional development hours. And if you meet these hours, then you get your bonus. But they would put forth what that recommendation is, and that would go out to the teachers for a vote. So please just hold tight, you're fine, don't worry, because if you are sick, you need to take your time. And that's something that's very important to us as well, because we want to make sure you're safe and healthy and your students are safe and your colleagues are safe.
Keeping it in the family for sure. Those are the only two additional questions I had. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay.
I have another question, the online. So 2 things about online. Laura Combs is basically going to be running that. So we don't know. So we don't, because it's a 17th school if we approve it, right? So it's a 17th school. So it should have somebody overseeing it. Those staff would report to that person. And just so there's
I want pieces.
Trying to understand how that works.
I know. And it's very complicated. So you talk about how things change in the wind. It changes very quickly. So in the mode that we're at this second, based on legal recommendation, is that because we don't know if we'll get approved for the AOI yet. Okay. So that could be September, it could be October. We're not really sure. Our legal counsel said, move forward with the governor's model with the distance learning or online learning. So that's what we're going to move forward with right now. What that looks like is we are working, I should say Wendy and Kim, and a lot of people are putting their heads together. What does that look like through Synergy? Because that's a very complicated component that I know no one has really probably thought of. So with that being said, right now, those teachers in our head right now would be still staying within their campus. Now, what we are working on is there an overlying coordinator, so to speak, and folks to help out, not only just with overseeing discipline or different things to help with whatever that site principal may need assistance with, but also even like registration. There's a lot of other little outlier components. So we're working through those details right now that we haven't got through in its entirety. So Laura is our go-to right now, is because she's kind of the expert in setting everything up. But we definitely know we're going to need Laura in a lot of different pieces. So we're trying to figure out how do we balance that academy and support it.
We only have one Laura, so we need to spread her around. Right. I understand.
Laura 1, Laura 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in that same thing about online school, we are saying that these kids are no longer, if they are part of the Digital Learning Academy, they're no longer tied to their home school or whatever school they were at anymore. Do we have a legal obligation if those kids decide, like those parents are like, I want my kid to go back to school? Do we have to let them, because we talked about these transition periods, but I mean, does that transition period mean anything? If a parent says, I want to put my kid in at their home school, do we have to let them into their home school at any time they want to do that?
That's something that we would probably have to look at and talk with legal. I think we probably could give a little bit of time, especially if it was a health issue and a safety component. But as of right now, they'll still be linked to their home campus. So same thing as what we're hoping with this whole process, that we'll get some of our homeschool students. So a homeschool student that lives in the environment, once things get back to normal or typical, they can participate in the sports or any of those after school activities on that campus. It's in their boundary. But yes, that could be it. We haven't worked through all of that piece yet, but that's something that we have definitely posed to legal that they're researching right now, because I think every district is doing that. But I'm kind of hoping that a lot of the people, I mean, I know there'll be one chunk of folks that'll just be interested in distance learning for a period of time, but I think there'll be some that'll be ready to commit for a longer period of time, or at least until, they feel like it's
more solid sort of health, remedies come out, whatever that might be. Absolutely.
Okay, I have a quick
So then
question.
the last question, which I don't think you can answer right now, but just throwing this out there so I can get information, is if we have 24% of our kids go do online, you said they're still going to be linked to their school. What does that mean about variances? And I know you might not be able to answer that now, and I'm sorry I didn't ask you, to let you know I was going to ask that, but I just want to have this information in the future because, yeah. So we've turned down a bunch of variances. There's people that might be reapplying. If we have kids move into this online platform, does that, I don't necessarily want it to make our class sizes have more space, but maybe, I just want to know what that.
So not really sure, because we haven't done the staffing to really, kind of tell. What we had done with what our preliminary approvals of open enrollment was based on the staff that we had in the moment that we had it, in the schools that we had it. Now we've kind of slowed things down just a little bit, because right now we're trying to meet all of these different needs with the current staff that we have without adding to staff, of course. So I don't know that at this moment. But I always encourage families that if anyone did receive a denial on an open enrollment, I always tell them reapply, because things are ever changing and the environment's ever changing. So we just never know.
Well, and that may apply to the following year as well,
Right.
which people decide to stay online because they find that it works really well for their family. Transportation is going to be provided for the hybrid if it's at different spots, correct? If somebody said, Liz,
we haven't got to that point yet. We are
that
providing
is the plan.
transportation for hybrid at your home school. We don't know.
But it's something that we're looking at.
Yeah. We're
Okay.
still at the very basic level right now and trying to match everybody up.
Okay.
We'll be working with our principals. So now what we're doing is running those detail reports so that principals will be able to sit down with their staff and know, okay, I need 2 in person, 1 hybrid, 1, and we'll start that process. That will be next week when we're with them.
Right. And then transportation comes after that.
Right.
Okay. I have 2 other quick things just that have come up sort of in this conversation. You, Melissa, brought up sort of our guest teacher program and what that might look like. With the Digital Learning Academy, right? Substitute teaching is going to look a little bit different, and potentially even in the hybrid and in person, I think it's all going to look a little bit different. One piece I didn't really think about until we were talking about it is, what does the technology look like? Because if they're in the hybrid or they're in distance learning, they're required to have a computer in order, and potentially in person, because we may be between scenario 1 and scenario 4 at any moment. So are we prepared to, or what would we need to do to ensure that those teachers have technology? Because now we're saying every student needs to have technology no matter what scenario they're in, truly. Will we be able to do the same, or, whether it's on campus or whatever? That might be way too detailed. I'm just thinking out loud here, because that could require some budget parameters for us to put in if we needed some additional technology. If we need to have guest teachers in the classroom, we're now sort of ensuring that everyone has to have technology.
Right. So what we're working on right now, we know from a staff perspective, everybody has technology, and we can support whenever there is a substitute. From a student perspective, we're working on our technology department is already has, I want to say it's around 80 additional laptops that they can deploy again for the sale of $1. Okay, so right about 80. See, that was pretty good. Around 80. And then now they're also working on being prepared to deploy as needed on the as needed component of these programs around 250 if needed additional.
Okay.
Then what we figured is we would kind of work in stages. So if the needs are greater, then we can start to prepare more. Now, with that being said, we also know that we don't have one-to-one deployment, so we probably will have to be more flexible, so to speak, on the in-person side of things, right? On the priority for the technology will be on those ones that have that distance learning on an ongoing time, if that makes sense.
Right. And the students, I mean, the student piece, I guess I understand. I'm just thinking, right. I mean, if you're a guest teacher that walks into a hybrid classroom and the teacher has taken their laptop home, which most of them do, especially if you're a hybrid teacher, you're going to be communicating with kids all the time. But their requirement is that they, you know what I mean, either log in or somehow communicate or whatever. I just want to make sure that we're prepared that there's something on campus that can.
And they usually have an extra computer for substitutes just for that reason, because a lot of times a teacher will forget or take their computer home.
Yeah, or aren't suspecting they're going to wake up and not feel well, obviously. So, okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. The second is, as we move to decide on these, there will be, I know in the last meeting we had sort of a timeline of when we think that they may have to, parents may have to commit, which is sometime around the middle of the month. There's still some gray areas, obviously, that we don't know, and we probably won't know. So in terms of some of those like specific curriculum pieces, honors, traditional academy, whether they're going to be available at my campus or not, you know,
right.
Will parents know that before they commit? And if they don't, what is going to be their option to change if you say we no longer have that option, so I might want to consider something different?
So what we're doing is working through all of those details. We may need them. We're anticipating the commit process to start either being able to send it out at the end of this week into next week, having it be for the next week. I don't know because we haven't broken down every single campus, and we're going to actually, it kind of makes me giggle. I feel like we're going backwards in time in a lot of things, like, you know, drive-in theaters are the cool thing to do now, right? So I keep saying we're going back to old style of staffing, which is what I did when I was a first principal. We all brought our little binders. We had our teachers all written out. We knew which holes we had, and we would sit in a room and talk. And see who was coming back from leave and who do you have, and do you have an extra one that can I have, and you know, kind of do that type of thing. So that's what we're planning for next week with our principals, to sit down, because we'll all have their exact data. Now it's based on our parent data from before, but I think it'll be pretty close to it. And then as we're getting the committal information, then we'll be able to look at that and possibly make some tweaks and fine tune. I don't know right now exactly where that sits. We didn't get into the, I don't even know how you guys sat there for like 8 hours almost. Just looking at sheer numbers, didn't get into the program specifics on those. So just not sure on that piece. So would I say that, you know, we're flexible? I would say we would try to be as flexible as we possibly could with parents. I think once we kind of get this initial piece, my thought is once this part happens and the committal part happens and we understand the staffing, a lot of it's going to push down to the school level. And I think that's going to be where that conversation with a parent that's linked to that specific school will have those conversations, because it's too hard from this level, because I don't know the intricacies of that particular campus. So yeah, I think once the campuses and the teachers can kind of get involved, and I know that they'll be able to probably work out even more creatively some flexibility with the different programs and the different structures for their kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just important that we realize that, you know, we don't have all the information, but because we don't have all the information, when we ask them to commit to something, you know, if they say, I really want to do hybrid, but I don't have transportation to another school and we can't offer it, then I have to go to the 5-day, or I have to go to online or something like that. So I think we're going to have to be, prior to school starting, obviously, you know, going to have some movement there, because I do feel like we'll probably have some, like you said, once we get down to the school level, we're going to have some.
See where that comes. And then we can see if transportation would be available for
Right,
them or
as we
not.
start to layer in all of those things. Okay.
Exactly.
Perfect. We can question you to death, Jody. So I'm going to go ahead and just call for
You're
the
doing
vote.
really good.
Oh, one more.
I feel like I'm in an interview. Sorry, one
Yes,
more
I
question.
know.
I have been
Before
trying to
parents, or before, you had talked about doing a parent forum. Is that something that you plan to do before we ask the parents for a commitment?
It'll probably be in the middle of the commitment, if that makes sense. So right now, I have it slotted. And we're planning for Monday and Tuesday. So if somebody really
week
had
from now.
reservations, they could
Monday.
wait to do their committal until after the forum.
Okay, Tanya, I'm not sure we had volume on you. I think you were trying to say something.
Yes, I have been. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. It's actually a really simple question because everything else has been answered. Is the distance learning model and the digital academy, so the digital academy being that's the sort of long-term, that's your plan sort of scenario, is that, and then the distance learning portion, which all kids will have to do potentially, right, at one point or another at the beginning of the year, or if we have times where we have to go to all distance learning again or whatever, are those the same thing? Are they on the same platform? Are they on the same schedule, the same setup, or are they different?
So they will be similar, but I will say they could very well be different, right? Because if I'm a teacher and I'm starting in online and I'm running, whether schools are shut down or open or not, that doesn't affect me because I have my focus and I'm moving forward.
Right.
As a hybrid teacher, theirs is going to be, both. They probably will be similar possibly to what's happening online, but some of it's going to be a little bit different because they have kids in class.
Right.
And then as we travel in and out of the distance learning, that's going to have to be fluid. So do I think they will be similar in a lot of ways? I think the structures and the components, so that we can up our game when we ever have to jump into distance learning from the other side. But I think our digital learning online academy teachers, those are the teachers that are going to really become experts of that online platform because that's what they're doing every day, regardless of whether we're closed, not closed, or anything along those lines. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, I think it does, but it will be using the same technology, the same platforms, the same. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Because we wanted to be able to provide things that all teachers could use in their classroom so it's easier to travel in and out, but pacing and those kind of things might be a little bit different.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That did answer my question.
Sorry, Tanya, I did not mean to leave you out of that. I saw your box turn yellow, so I wanted to make sure that I got to you, so I apologize for that. Okay, well, I am going to, I will entertain a motion in regards to our learning models for 2020 school year.
Okay. I motion to approve all three learning models as presented.
Okay. You did. I will second that. Any last minute discussion or comments? No.
Oh,
okay.
You're looking at me.
I will say this, and I think we've said it many times this evening, so I hope people understand. We are going to decide this today, and this is our effective plan as we know it today. And next week, if something changes, or when we are back together on July 21st, if we have to address these in different ways, we will certainly do that. So we are hoping that this is going to be our plan for now, but know that we will remain flexible. Knowing that, I'm going to call each board member individually. So the motion on the table is to approve all three learning models as presented for the 2021 school year. Melissa, what is your vote?
Melissa Zaidema, yay.
Elaine?
Elaine Weathersby, yay.
Tanya?
Tanya Fitzer, yay.
Danielle Clymer, I am also yay. Any opposed? No. Motion carries. All three learning models have been approved. And we will adjust as necessary. 15, last on the list, possible approval of change to school start date. So I think we've talked about this a little bit, but I think Jody's going to go through the options we have to decide on tonight.
Okay, So we wanted to look at several options when we're looking at return to school. And I know it's kind of small, but we included kind of a lot of different things in. So option number one is meaning that we are utilizing our typical start date, which would be August 3rd. We listed some pros and cons for this option. Pros is that the calendar remains the same for staff and students. We have 3 days of training for all of our different groups. The cons is that we have 10 days of that 95% funding that Wendy mentioned because the governor has stated that we can't open for in-person until August 17th. Teachers with kids at home, that was something that we are definitely working on and considering in any of these sections. And only 3 days of training, which we would then recommend that we add 2 additional PD days outside of the contract to prepare them for their school year. Option 2 basically states that August 17th, which is the date as of now that the governor has stated that we could go back to in-person learning, so that we would just move our start date to August 17th where all models would begin. The pros is that we would have 13 days of training and planning in all of those pieces. If all went well and we were able to have some in-person, we'd have that 100% funding for those kiddos. And same pay schedule for our teachers. So we wanted to make sure our contract time with our teachers would still remain the same. The cons is the possible calendar change to meet the 180 days might be something that we need, and we're not sure exactly what the calendar requirements are going to look like just yet. Students' summer, though, is a con, that their summer is extended 2 additional weeks. And that calendar changes may be needed for that particular start date. So we may have to come back to you with some additional calendar switches, especially if the 180-day requirement is still left in place. Option number 3 is kind of a catch in the middle of those. It would be an August 10th start date for all students. This would allow us 8 days of training and planning for our teachers. Again, their schedule would kind of remain the same. The cons is that 95% funding for that first 5 days because everybody's distance learning. The other con is that student summer extends another 1 more week, and that calendar changes may be needed, especially too if that 180-day requirement is still in play. So we're not sure. ADE has the option to put forth a waiver based on the last executive order, but we're not really sure where they are on that piece. And then option number 4 is an August 5th start date for all of our students. This option would provide 5 days of training for our staff, same pay schedule for all of our teachers, and the cons would be the 95% funding for those would just be that first would be the 8 days, and students summer would extend only 2 days, and calendar change needed. We'd have to come back to you probably for the calendar change for the start date. You asked for some of the cost with each of those, and we figured out the cost for the 95% funding on each of those. So of course, the number 2 option, there's no cost because that's always with the caveat that if we opened up for that in person. Option 1 would be about a $99,000 cost. Option 3 would be about a $49,000 cost, and option 4 would be a $79,000 cost of that distance learning timeframe. Now, also then remembering too that we could also put forth that cost with the CARES request grant for the governor too with that piece. I would recommend, or my recommendation is option 4, because that would give us that 5 days of training for our staff without going outside of their contract time. So they're already expecting to come back that August 3rd. So that would give us that time, and it would minimize the extension of a child's summer break, because we definitely don't want that either. So I felt like that was kind of that happy medium, but would entertain any questions or conversations, discussion. Okay.
I'm just gonna go quickly. Number one, in terms of the cost, the scenario number one was 99,000. Number two, there was no cost, right? Because we're waiting. Number three was 49,000. Number four was 79,000. Okay, just wanna make sure I understood that. Okay. I'm going to throw something out there and maybe just throw a wrench in everything. We have been talking a lot this evening about funding. We always do, but this even more so because there are some major downfalls to things that we might choose. I mean, the fact that it's less than $100,000 feels like a blessing to me, and that's odd. I can't believe that we're happy that we're going to spend $80,000 or $90,000 to do what we think is best for our kids and best for all of our campuses. But that's what we're going to do. With that being said, knowing that August 17th date is aspirational, that's a quote from our governor in his last press conference. So I know he's struggling also with what that date looks like. I will just start off the bat. I think that number two model is not feasible in the sense that August 17th is not a set date. If we knew it was a set date, we could use that as a benchmark. We don't. It could be September 1st. It could be September 15th. And I would hate for us to get to August 3rd or August 5th and the governor says, you just can't do it. It's not safe. We're going to push it back. And then we're literally pivoting on 24 hours notice, which we have done before, but we have time now to plan. So in my opinion, I think number two is probably not the safest bet, knowing that that date could be pushed. What I also want to make clear is that if we do pick an earlier date, and I mean, the district of Litchfield and Jody Gunning, our superintendent, do not feel like it is safe to open in any capacity, although that 17th date may still be there. What are our options?
Okay, so let me clarify to make sure. I believe what you're asking me is if the governor is still stuck with August 17th as the in-person option, but I did not feel, and nor did us as a leadership staff and you as a board, what are our options? So our options would be at that time is that what we would do is I would come to you just like I did in the past and say, I would recommend that we continue to remain in a distance learning model. Now, we are not sure exactly at this point and in this moment what the ramifications to the budget might be, but we do know that what we feel confident, when I say we, that means my legal counsel in my pocket right here, is that if we offered a 5-day option, meaning a safe place for children to go that really need it, that we could continue on in a distance learning model. So what that means, because I know some people are like, well, what does that mean? Well, that would mean that I would have to set up a different spot within that campus, within that school, not necessarily staffed by certified teachers, but staffed by our staff to help support those children so that they could obtain their distance learning in a safe place that's actually housed within a campus.
But it's a childcare setting. It is not
It wouldn't be a
teacher to
classroom.
student. I mean, it could be a teacher, but it most likely wouldn't be because
they would be accessing their distance learning through their teacher.
Right. But they would be being monitored or supervised by someone.
They would have access to the internet.
Right. Okay. All of those things. So we would leave that open. So granted, we don't know what that cost would look like in terms of funding, right? I mean, we know right now that we're looking at less than $100,000, but that could double, triple, depending on when that is. So we do have that option on the table. So no matter what we decide tonight, if we get closer and we just say there's absolutely no way
to do in person,
no matter what the state says or the Department of Education says, we do have some ability to say we're going to stay in distance learning until we feel like we can pull this off.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. I'm feeling much better about that. Since I'm talking, I'm just going to throw out what I want and then we'll go ahead just so that we can make this quicker. I think the scenario 4, whereas, I mean, it's not the least expensive model, but I like the fact that we get the additional days of training. It's still within our contract period. It's still within the first week of school. It's a couple days behind. You know, of course, I wish that we knew a little bit more in our crystal ball of what that August 17th date looked like, but knowing that that could potentially be pushed, I think waiting any later to that to start would put us at a major disadvantage for calendaring out in terms of breaks and when school ends at the end of the year and things like that. So I would be in favor of at least, discussing that option 4.
I'm absolutely in agreement with 4. I'm going to go based off of your recommendation, knowing what you've put together on here, what you've looked at through the calendar. They both have the same pros and cons. As you said, money is the really only issue. It's got the same pay schedule for the teachers. It's got the extra, it gets people in time to get acclimated to the online so that if that date for in-person is pushed back, we're already rolling for sure.
Agreed.
Melissa?
So I have gone back and forth with this since we first heard that schools were pushing back the in-person, because that's not what he said at first. He did not say in-person. He just said school start date was getting pushed back to the 17th. And I thought, hallelujah, because we need more time. But then they were like, no. Actually, we just meant in-person, but distance learning can start. So then I was like, well, man. And then we started hearing, like through the rumor mill, whatever, but probably realistically, if you look at our numbers, that date's going to get pushed back probably. And so I've been like, well, I mean, if that's going to get pushed back, we have to wait. I mean, we have to start. We have to start our distance learning now. We have to get our kids learning, because the idea of starting kindergarten in distance learning sounds awful if it's only 2 weeks, but if it's going to be a month, we need to get started. My only reservation right now is that today our president said you need to get kids back in school. And so I am concerned that maybe that 17th date might really stick now. That's my only concern now, is that states are really getting pushed to get kids back in school from a higher level than at the state level. So that's my only concern. But I would say that overall, I do agree, probably starting on the 5th as opposed to the 3rd is good as far as giving our teachers extra time. I'd like them to have even a little more time, but
yeah,
any extra days is good. And I have faith in our teachers figuring out how to do distance learning with our kindergartners. God bless them.
Tanya, do you have any comments or suggestions on either option 4 or any of the options?
Not really. I mean, I think that obviously Jody's done her due diligence and, her team around her. I think that if that's her suggestion, when I looked at them, I'd looked at 3 or 4, what is the difference between those days? If she feels the 5 days of training, is adequate and we just get this ball rolling, then, I think it's probably the right way to go.
Great.
And again, with that caveat,
Agreed.
as you discussed, Danielle, too.
Completely. So, okay, good. I think we are all in agreement. We will make a motion in just a second. So I just want to, address what you said about, we have obviously pressures that are not just within our district or even our Department of Ed, but we have, our governor and our president and a lot of people weighing in on this. So you could potentially be right that the 17th may be a sticking date, which is, quite honestly why I asked if we don't feel like the people that are actually going to be implementing these policies and getting 11,000 kids back to school safely in some format, what options do we have? And I know we sat up here and talked about how much funding means to us. But, I think we need to keep the conversation open that we need to know what that cost looks like if we cannot make this work. If we don't feel like we can make this work. I mean, we can only push this so far before we're not comfortable doing that. And if it means losing 5% of funding, that is going to stink and we're going to have to work our tails off to cut that from someplace else and whatnot. But
we will make it work.
Yeah, we have a responsibility to, all of the planning and everything that has gone into this to be able to actually implement those plans. And if we can't do that in the environment that we're currently in, I think that has to be a 5th option, right? So anyway, it is. I just wanted to say that's why I said that. So I will move to vote. I move that we adopt school start date option number 4, which would put us at a school start date of August 5th, based on the document in front of us.
I second.
Great. I will go individually. Melissa, your vote?
Melissa's item, aye.
Elaine?
Elaine Weathersby, yay.
Tanya?
Tanya Fitzer, yay.
Danielle Clymer, I am also yay, or yes, or let's do this.
I'll be back.
Okay, so that is 4 in the affirmative, so motion carries. As of right now in this moment, I keep saying that because it will change, hopefully not, but it could be. We will have August 5th as our start date with additional teacher training and stuff. So that'll be great. All of this, again, will be communicated out to our parents and our staff. So please know that we will do our best to make sure everybody understands what this means. And if we do have to change it again, we'll continue to do that. With that, before we move to adjourn, thank you, Jody. These committees' presentations, while they might have been long, I think they answered a lot of questions, and I think they calmed a lot of fears, or at least some, and really important that we, be as transparent as we can and communicate. So we've still got work to do, but I think the work that we've done to date is pretty impressive. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
I motion to adjourn.
All right, I will second that. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Great. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Good evening.
Good night.